Smith Show. Thanks for being here today on the big program. Lots of things to get to. Let's talk about the big weekend. If there were ever a time that I would have gone to the big gala event, when I gone to the big ball, it would have been this past weekend. This would have been the time for me to go to the Pennsylvania Society because evidently it was like crickets. Every report I saw, the statement was there were more people here last year. And look, I'm not a big fan of crowds, so probably would have been, kind of something I would have not minded. Now, the whole idea of having to dress up, not a big fan of the tie. I probably would have gone like John Fetterman with the t-shirt tuxedo, and we'll get John Fetterman's thoughts on the big Pennsylvania Society Gala weekend and his experience there in the next segment. But it just got me thinking. As I woke up this morning, I had two sets of thoughts about the budget. Where are we going? Where are things going to head from here? Since now the incentive to get the party dress and go to the big ball is over, and that is holding over their heads. Now there's really almost no incentive for the Republicans or the crazy ones. And I understand, I had a couple of conversations with a number of state reps and state senators this morning. I was over at a Christmas party. The Iron Workers invited me to come over to their end of the year event, and I had the opportunity to talk to a bunch of different reps and state senators, and the message was pretty clear. We don't know what's going to happen. There's a crazy number of right-wing ideologues, or as one of the state senators agreed with me, true believers. Nice guys, you can play golf with them or whatever. Nice, but crazy. The true believer crowd who nothing is ever going to get done. And I've been saying this for a very long time. All of this, what's going on, only benefits the Republicans because they're the ones who have always been saying government doesn't work, government's broken. And this is why, as every one of those reps and senators that I talked to today said, they're not getting their office slammed with calls. People are not rallying at the Capitol. There's really nothing going on. And to their surprise, all of them to a T said, I thought at this point, there would be somebody coming out and saying, hey, come on, get this done already. It's, again, crickets. And it was my thought that, maybe things change after that first school closes. But the reality is that's probably wrong too. It's probably not going to change until my school closes. It's probably not going to change until the upper middle class school districts are the ones squealing the loudest. Because right now it's all of the poor schools. It's all of the schools who are at the margins anyway. And maybe that's what it's going to take. Now, I have no optimism whatsoever that the Republicans are going to get this done. I have no optimism whatsoever. And the response I got from a number of people is, I said, at some point they got to lead, right? And he goes, look, they can't even get out of their own way, let alone lead. So, to me, it's at one point I had some hope that, this is an ideological thing. They want what they want, and they're getting almost everything that they want. Understand that. But that's still not enough. And what's frightful, what's really kind of scary is that it's a handful. It's a small number of these really way out, led by Mike Turzai. And as the one guy said, it's going to be interesting to see coming into the new year which direction the Republican Party goes. Do they oust Dave Reed or do they oust Mike Turzai? And this is kind of the interesting little backstory, the Machiavellian politic of how each of these folks are, aligning their little camp and attempting to destroy each other. And, I would be okay with that if there weren't so many bad things going to happen. I would be okay with it if they were just two idiots out in a field somewhere jousting. Go ahead, knock yourselves out. But the reality is you've got all of the state's business not being done. And now that they didn't go to the party, that they didn't get to go. Now, Scott Wagner, I understand, was there. He wouldn't miss the shindig. Doesn't care what people think, and hopefully his constituents will remember that the next time he stands for election. But, you look at this and you go, okay, now that's gone. Where do they go? Do we see a budget proposal in the coming days? I woke up this morning with the headline reading, Wolf and House Republicans hopeful for a budget this week. But as I talked to the members of the House that I know, they were not hopeful. And then the question becomes is how long does this go? While understanding that while things are grinding to a halt, this is the Republicans winning. This is them saying, look, government's broken. Because, as I've had conversations with people over the weekend, everyone said they're not upset because they know government's broken. This has been 30 years of say, government's broken, and we're just at the end of it. And a lot of my friends and a lot of the people that I know are just kind of like, well, it just is what it is. We've been, I think, almost trained at this point to not care. On the federal level, we've had, hostage situation after crisis, after fiscal cliff, after sequester, you name it. We've been at the brink so many times that people are like, just do it already. And the question then becomes, when do we say enough of the shenanigans? Because we can't, and maybe it's going to take that catastrophe, as I've often said it's going to. But when do we wake up from it and say, you know what, this is insane. We need schools. We need water inspected. We need trash picked up. We need potholes filled. There are things that government needs to be doing. And I had an interesting conversation not too long ago with Eugene DePasquale, the Auditor General, who was saying, look, he goes, about 90% of all of the audits I do, they're doing exactly what they're supposed to do within the parameters that they're supposed to do it, being very fiscally responsible with the money that they're given. He said it's only a handful of cases really where you see anything really completely out of bounds. And that's what gets all of the message. That's what gets all the news. And that's where the Republicans grab onto, say, broken. When the vast majority of everything we, the people, do for ourselves through our government is run right, is run efficiently, is run cost effectively. It's the handful that bring everything to a screeching halt and give these radical right wingers the talking point that has gotten us to the point where we go, so it must be broken. So the hope is this week, people really put some pressure on them, because I don't know that anybody wants to be dealing with this over the Christmas holiday or into the new year. But maybe what will be ringing in the new year is more dysfunction. Sad stuff. Anyway, the big party this weekend, I got to find out what happened. We got John Fetterman, the mayor of Braddock, Pennsylvania, going to come on the program. He's also running for state senate. We'll talk about that, the big party, all of that stuff. Your thoughts, your questions, your comments, Rick at thericksmithshow.com, or give us a call, 1-888-520-RICK, 1-888-520-7425. This is The Rick Smith Show. Quick break. Right back. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1990. That was the day that 20,000 workers in the city of Fez, in the North African country of Morocco, went out on strike. Austerity measures had hit the country's working people hard during the 1980s. A drought had made the situation even worse. Unemployment rates for those under 21 had soared to higher than 30%. Two labor unions, the General Workers' Trade Union and the Democratic Confederation of Labor, called for a general strike. Government officials agreed to meet with the unions to discuss their demands, but the government would not agree to specific wage increases. Plans for the general strike moved forward. It is estimated that more than half of the Fez workforce participated in the general strike. Large numbers of workers in other Moroccan cities also participated in the action. In Fez, bus drivers showed their solidarity by joining the strike. In response, the government attempted to keep bus service going by putting police and soldiers behind the wheel. This angered many of the young demonstrators, and some threw stones at the scab drivers. Armed forces clashed violently with the strikers. The government claimed the strikers started the violence. The protesters pointed toward the police. A fire was started at the 5-star Hotel Melendez in Fez. Other symbols of wealth, such as limousines, car dealerships, and banks, were also damaged. After the 24-day strike, Moroccan officials claimed that 2 demonstrators had been killed. But human rights groups disputed that number and said 33 had been killed. Many more were injured. Hundreds were arrested. After the strike, the government agreed to raise wages by 15%. Many protesters were tried for their participation in the demonstrations. Some received prison sentences as long as 10 years. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
This is the Media Matters Minute. I'm Eric Wustewald. In early December, Secretary of Defense Ash Carter announced that women would now be allowed to serve in all military combat roles. But when co-host Sandra Smith brought it up on Fox News' Outnumbered, Andrea Tinteros dismissed the idea. Here are Smith and Tinteros.
To Catherine's point, Andrea, she's saying as long as there is a physical endurance test and that woman passes it, she should be fair game for a combat unit.
No, I don't think so. Their mind needs to be on killing the enemy alone. And from the SEALs that I have talked to, when there's a woman in the unit, It is not. 14 Americans are gunned down, and they roll him out to make some very PC announcement about women.
But as Defense Secretary Carter noted about women in combat during his announcement, women will be allowed to serve in all military combat roles because, quote, we cannot afford to cut ourselves off from half of the country's talent and skills. For more on this and other stories, please visit MediaMatters.org.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous. The salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME. We make Pennsylvania happen!
Demanding the super rich to pay their fair share for once. The Rick Smith Show.
They discriminate by race and hate. Won't pay nobody living wage. Walmart's here, let's all rejoice. Everyone is gone and we got no choice. So Walmart, give the country snow.
And along with it, a lot of manufacturing jobs in a lot of communities across this country. In fact, EPI just came out with a report over the weekend that said that thanks to Walmart, we have lost about 400,000 jobs because of our massive trade deficit with China and really the push. You go back and you read about the story of basically how Walmart forced so many manufacturers over to China because of squeezing every cost, and we want the lowest price. And what it got us, well, we got millions of jobs lost. And they're saying Walmart itself, from 2001 to 2013, they were the ones who 4,000 jobs. That's a lot. Anyway, welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So the big party this past weekend, the big gala, and I'm sure all of the reps not very happy they didn't get to go to the party, but that's what happens when you don't do your work. One of the folks who was there running for U.S. Senate here in Pennsylvania, he's the mayor of Braddock, Pennsylvania, John Fetterman. John, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, great to be here.
So you went to the big party, did you?
Yeah, my first Pennsylvania Society event ever. Yep. Absolutely.
So, I mean, that's kind of interesting. I mean, you got the mayor of a small town, one that's struggling, going to the opulence and the outrageousness of the big ball. Well, what's your impression?
Well, I mean, my impression is, and I don't think this would surprise anybody, is that, coming from Braddock, coming from, living across the street directly from a steel mill, and, coming from the Mon Valley, that, the Waldorf Astoria isn't my scene per se. but everybody there was, incredibly warm, and we had a good trip, and overall it was a very positive experience. And again, Braddock also plays a very unique part in the event as well too. When you consider the origin of the event was the large robber barons of that day originally started doing this as a tradition many years ago, decades ago. And one of them, of course, was Andrew Carnegie, and his first steel mill is the one I'm standing at looking at my window right now while I'm on the phone. So there is an interesting connection there. Certainly not in terms of opulence and surroundings, but certainly on the blood, sweat, and tears from the workers that put Carnegie in that position.
Yeah, and it's an interesting legacy, if you will. While the steel mills have gone for the most part, and especially in places like Braddock, we actually still have his last steel mill. We have Andrew Carnegie's first library here in town, and his first and now the only remaining steel mill really in the Pittsburgh area. So, and I live right across the street from it. Wow. And I understand. And look, some of my steelworker friends tell me we actually produce more steel now than we did back then, just with a whole lot less people. Yeah, no, the technology and some other aspects. And I just hope they keep producing steel across the street, because, that would be devastating to the families that depend on that as a job, and certainly for my community as well, too. And with these outrageous, trade deals and the kind of, lack of fair trade and dumping and all these other practices from the Asian countries, they're definitely under assault. I look at this report from Walmart, from the Economic Policy Institute. The Walmart's cost us some 400,000 jobs. Now, of course, they push back on it, saying, we create all of these other jobs. Well, I got one that they haven't pushed back on. The Forbes.com did a study on Walmart, and their workers cost the federal government $6.2 billion a year in benefits because they pay them so poorly. Right. So, and they haven't pushed back on that, because that's a fact. That's not open to interpretation. And it's what I've said all along. It's like, if you don't pay people a living wage, it's not like you're getting anything for cheaper. It's just you're doing it in a way that demoralizes families and neighborhoods and communities. And the society still pays, in the end. So why not do it right up front and pay a living wage at $15 an hour? I'm with you. But, here's the thing. And you look at these free trade schemes, and I've had people tell me, well, Rick, because of our free trade, the cost of our things are 12 to 13% lower because Harvard University said so. And I go, but wait a second. What if our wages are 20% less? Does that 12 to 13% make it that better? Yeah, well, and also it's like, and just because it's cheap doesn't mean it's right. That doesn't mean it's good. It's like, it means that China, for the first time ever, had to declare a code red because the air outside was actually lethal. So it's like this idea, like, well, if it's cheap, it must be good for the economy or good for society. I can't believe anyone's still arguing that at this day and age. Yeah, well, they're trying to ram through another bad trade deal, which is why I think it's important, especially in this race that you're in the midst of, that we talk about the fair trade as opposed to these free trade schemes. I look at the TPP, and I'm hearing rumors that maybe it's dead, maybe it's not going to happen until after this presidential election, which would make me very happy. But we still got to talk about where would you be on that issue, as opposed to maybe Senator Toomey, or as opposed to maybe Joe Sestak or Katie McGinty. Well, I certainly am adamantly opposed to the TPP. I was before we knew exactly what it was, and I think the universal consensus is now that the text has been revealed that it's actually worse than people thought. So, if you can point to me a trade agreement that has benefited blue-collar communities and working towns like mine, I would love to see it, because as a matter of principle and fact, all they have done is to devastate communities like my own and regions like the Mon Valley, and continue to destroy family-sustaining middle-class jobs. Now, what do you say to the person, John, who says, well, you know what, the golden age of manufacturing is gone in the U.S. We're never bringing those jobs back. It's the new environment. We've got to be creating other jobs. Give up on the manufacturing. What do you say to those folks? I'd say that's a false choice. It's like,
You know, like we can't all be software engineers for Google, you know. This country still needs to make things, you know, and, from a competitive advantage, from a strategic advantage, from a
military.
You need to make these things. You need to be a manufacturer. It's like, that doesn't mean we can't do it cleaner. That doesn't mean we can't do it more efficient. But at the end of the day, we in this country still need to make things. And, it's like, this, again, it's one of the false choices. Like, you can't care about the environment and care about the economy. If you legalize marijuana, you're going to have Pineapple Express, and it's going to be crazy. If you grant marriage equality, we're all going to, hell, and the institution will be, and all these things are constantly proven to be true, proven to be false. And, but they keep, teeing up this, this false choice. And it's like, don't listen to it. Don't take them at their word. And, for Pete's sake, no more free trade agreements.
No, I'm with you. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're here with John Fetterman, mayor of Braddock, Pennsylvania, also running for U.S. Senate here in Pennsylvania on the Democratic side. You can get to his website, johnfetterman.com. We've got a link at the ricksmithshow.com. Just click on John's name, take you right there. Now, I read a story, John, and maybe you can tell me if it's true or not. I'm sure it probably is. You showed up with the tuxedo T-shirt, really?
Yeah, well, I showed up dressed the way I normally would. With boots and Levi's and my Dickie shirt, but underneath it, I had a T-shirt tuxedo just in case there was a dress code where it's like, sir, this is black tie, and I'm like, well, here you go, So
see, my kind of guy. Anybody who knows me, I'm the same way. In fact, I don't actually own a suit and tie. I certainly don't own a tuxedo. I think the last time I had a tuxedo on was the Miami Vice collection in 1987 when I went to prom. So, that ain't happening. So the T-shirt, the tuxedo T-shirt was the only way I was getting into any black tie event. So why you running for a job where you'd have to wear a suit every day, or would you not? Would you be the guy who bucked the system?
Well, like I said, I'm not measuring the drapes in the Senate office just yet. I'm not really worried about the dress attire. But what I am worried about is that maintaining the integrity of the office that I'm proud to serve, and that's the mayor of this community. And we're a working class town, and I wear a work shirt every day, and it would be inappropriate to do otherwise. And like I said, I honestly don't own a shirt and tie, and as like I said, it's because of the community that I represent and the people that I'm proud to carry their flag for.
Yeah, because I got to tell you, John, I talk to people all the time, and your message is getting out, and people love you. I mean, the reality is everybody I met this weekend who we started talking about the Senate race, because we just had Joe Sestak on Friday. Everyone says, I like that guy. He's one of us, and I'm sure you hear that a lot.
Well, I am. It's like, I'm not exaggerating. I could send you a picture real time. I'm literally standing across the street from a steel mill looking out the front window of my home. And it's like, this is our reality. And 550 men and women, work across the street. They're all union workers. I'm good buddies with the union president there. I mean, these guys, shine messages on the mill, demanding a fair contract from U.S. Steel. I mean, from my roof. I mean, it's just like, this is who we are. And this is our story. And what happened to Braddock and happened to so many other communities across our country, and that's, one of the key reasons why I'm running is like, what has happened, to these, once prosperous legacy cities in our Commonwealth. And we have to get it back. And that's, a big reason why I'm running.
Yeah, and what's happened to our middle class? I mean, the reality is.
Well, they've gone the way of our legacy cities, And this idea like, oh, we don't need manufacturing anymore. It's like, yeah, it says the guy making $150,000 at Google. But for other people, that's, we need these manufacturing jobs. America, cannot get flabby in that sense, and we can't afford to lose any more manufacturing jobs for a whole host of reasons.
No, I'm with you. But at the end of this, for me, for a very long time, I've been calling for average, everyday working people to step forward, throw their hat in the rings. But the sad reality is, with our campaign finance laws or lack thereof, and the amount of money.
It's even worse than that. Yeah. I mean, I thought I knew just how important money was in politics. And I'm like, it's much worse, so I agree with you. It's a system that by its very nature weeds out, people that should otherwise be afforded the chance to participate in the public process.
And I keep saying that's why the wealth class spends so much money on politics. They understand how important it is. And I don't know if you've seen the numbers. There was a report done not too long ago by wealth.
150 families contribute like 50%. Yeah, is that the one you're referencing?
Well, that's one of them. But the other one is voter participation by wealth. And, it's no wonder that programs for the poor and the working class are not being addressed because we're not voting. I mean, at some point, there's got to be a voting revolution, John.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And that's one of the sad facts is that the people that rely on the programs the most are oftentimes the least likely to actually exercise their democratic vote. It's like if the other side, ever marshaled their votes, we could remake the country exactly the way that we all would want it to do. And that's, again, part of the reason why I'm running this campaign is to bring more people into that conversation, into that dialogue, because there's a lot of communities across Pennsylvania that need the reinvestment after giving so much to make this, commonwealth and this nation great.
That's why I'm glad to see Bernie Sanders on the running for president, and I'm glad to see that you've thrown your hat in to run for this Senate race. At least the issues will be talked about. At least some of the working class issues will be pushed to the front, and I give you credit for that.
Well, and I give you credit for taking the time and having me on. It's always great to be on your show.
I appreciate it, John. Look forward to talking to you again real soon. And hey, nice job on the T-shirt.
Thank you very much. Again, I wouldn't have it any other way. If I have to show up in a tux, I guess I won't go. But I gotta do it the only way I know how.
There you go, man. After my own heart, John Fetterman. I appreciate the time. Thanks so much. Again, the website johnfetterman.com. You can get to the link from our site, thericksmithshow.com. Just click on John's name. Take you right there. Love that guy. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. Right back after this. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
10% of people own 90% of the wealth. Where do you fit in? Take a look at yourself. 10% of the people own 90% of the wealth.
Where smart policy and sound investment matters. The Rick Smith Show.
We will not sign off on any agreement that represents a certain extinction of our people.
UN climate talks stall on temperature target.
There is a civil or criminal violation that arises from what they did, then it should be pursued.
Hillary Clinton calls for prosecuting ExxonMobil. Climate denier academics caught soliciting payments from fossil fuel interests. Plus,
I've never heard anything quite so ridiculous.
Rush Limbaugh's guest host given U.S. Senate platform to deny climate change.
Kiddos, all of those stories and more straight ahead. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Some insist time to avoid catastrophe is running out. Others are really stupid.
Not to put too fine a point on it, this is your Green News Report.
Ridiculously earth-shatteringly stupid.
Okay, Desi Doyen, 195 countries, 21 years in the making. Just hours left. Will all of these nations be able to come together to come up with one single global treaty to keep the earth from becoming unlivable?
I'm pretty sure they'll come up with a treaty. The question is, will it be a good one? They are pulling overnighters as we go to air at the United Nations climate talks in Paris. Officials are negotiating that comprehensive agreement for all nations to cut global greenhouse gas emissions. A major conflict. Island nation states and low-lying developing nations are calling for the official target of global temperatures to rise no more than 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial times. That's a goal much harder to meet than the current target of 2 degrees Celsius. That's because, as UN consultant Dr. Hugh Seeley of the island nation of Grenada said on the broadcast this week, these nations will disappear under rapidly rising seas.
Climate change is an existential threat. This is not something that's an economic issue for us. This is an existential issue for us. So our backs are literally against the wall on this one, and therefore we will fight for our existence. We will fight for 1.5 to be anchored in the agreement.
The deadline for the talks is Friday. The conference could very well go into overtime. We'll have the thrilling conclusion of the fate of our world in our next episode. Here in the U.S., oil giant ExxonMobil is in damage control over revelations that it misled investors and the public on the science of climate change. And now in a video posted by climate activist group 350.org, Democratic presidential candidate Hillary Clinton at a town hall-style campaign event this week said she supports prosecution of Exxon.
I want us to be looking at what ExxonMobil told their shareholders, told the public. And so, if there is a civil or criminal violation that arises from what they did, then it should be pursued.
Exxon's own scientists, as early as 1977, understood what was going on with the increase of carbon in the atmosphere. They understood that the results, if we kept burning this carbon into the atmosphere, would be, quote, catastrophic. They said it over and over again, and then Exxon spent millions to obscure that science. They need to be held accountable as any other public company would be held accountable for lying to the public and to shareholders. So, no, I'm not unhappy at all that the heat is on ExxonMobil. Hold them accountable, just the way Big Tobacco was held accountable for lying to the public.
Meanwhile, 2 prominent U.S. professors have been caught soliciting payment from fossil fuel interests in exchange for casting doubt on climate change.
Wait, can we do that?
We could, but I wouldn't want to.
Oh, I could use the money.
Well, anyway, undercover Greenpeace activists posed as fossil fuel industry consultants seeking academic papers claiming that rising CO2 levels are good for the planet. 2 American academics offered to write those reports in exchange for payments of as much as $15,000. The investigation exposes how the fossil fuel industry can easily insert bought and paid for climate change denial into the public domain without the public knowing the true source of the funding.
Nice work if you can get it.
Finally, Republican Senator and presidential candidate Ted Cruz is apparently running out of actual climate scientists to deny climate change. So at his Senate Science Committee hearing on Tuesday, Cruz called on right-wing pundit Mark Stein to testify against the national security threat posed by climate change.
We are planning now for global security threats a century hence, because the Maldives might have been swept away by water by then. The entire population of the Maldives are all Sunni Muslim, so they'll fit in perfectly fine if they all move to this Brussels suburb that produced the shooters in Paris.
What the hell is he talking about?
That's a good question.
And that was a hearing on climate science?
In the Senate.
Well, I guess they couldn't get Rush Limbaugh himself. They had to get his guest host, Mark Stein. What a world. For much more on all of the stories we covered today and the ones we couldn't get to, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find us and follow us on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Nice work if you can get it. And if you get it, won't you tell me how?
Your proud defender of the American dream, Rick Smith.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. I got to tell you, I love that idea. The tuxedo T-shirt to the big Pennsylvania Society Ball. I think that's fitting for the guy who comes from the hometown of Carnegie Steel Mill. And understand, Carnegie was one of the robber barons at the time that set up the whole Pennsylvania Society. So he could, go. Him and the family could go and buy Christmas stuff. And of course, spread some cash around and peddle some influence. Anyway, not much this year. Like I said, this would have been the year I would have gone. Anyway, let's find out more about it and also what's going on with the budget. We've got our good friend Kevin Mahoney, editor 0 over at Raging Chicken Press. Kevin, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick, it's a happy Monday. I mean, now that you got the Christmas tree all sparkly and lit up in the Capitol building, the budget has got to fall into place. Well, this afternoon or something, right?
They even have the Christmas tree and the governor's mansion open so that you can go through and take a look at that as well. Maybe as a diversion to help us forget about it.
Daryl Metcalf and some of his right-wing nut job backbenchers were so incredibly happy that, filled with the Christmas spirit, that they headed outside the Capitol to have a nice anti-Muslim rally with some kind of right-wing nut job organization just to keep things in that Christmas spirit.
Beautiful. It's nice to have all the time to do crazy stuff when you don't have to worry about, something like a budget.
Yeah, but really, Rick, a budget? What do we need a budget for?
We need to get rid of those Muslims.
Come on, I mean, they're doing fine, right? I mean, so everybody must be doing fine. I mean, forget the school teachers, just get in the Christmas spirit, suck it up and do it for free. Come on, it's about giving, right?
Well, isn't that what they say what the teachers should be doing anyway?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Right.
You love it, don't you? And it's all about the children.
Love it, right? Because it's, you do it because you love it, not because you want to get paid for it. That just makes everything dirty. So I don't know. It just, but it's pretty crazy. I mean, if you just watch the events over the past several days. You get Friday, as part, connected up with the big GOP fundraiser out there in New York, connected with the Pennsylvania Society dinner that's coming up. You got a Trump rally sponsored in part, got hooked up with the PA Society dinner there that gets violent, throws some people down some stairs and stuff. And you're just kind of looking at this as, it really is kind of like back into that 19th century, that kind of like Dickens way of looking at things. You got these people living in a completely separate world. And meanwhile, the vast majority of us are just, wanting to get by and wanting to be able to kind of do our job. And these people are just living off in la la land. I mean, they just need to get to work and get this done. And to move forward. And, because meantime is that there's enough of us that are just starting to get a little frustrated and have to say, you know what, if you guys are going to do this, we're just going to have to start pushing you a little bit because it's not going to work right.
But didn't you think, I got to be honest, I had hoped at this point there would already be that we're going to push you. And this morning I had a conversation with a number of state reps and state senators who are all just kind of shocked that, the pitchforks aren't out yet.
It is remarkable, I have to say. I mean, we've talked about this. It just, I can't quite place why there hasn't been kind of more mobilization. I mean, it is what it is, though. I mean, this is, I think that everybody kept on, hoping that, and Thanksgiving came, holiday spirit kind of thing, or everyone wanted to get done before Christmas. And, I'm reminded of those first years during Obama's administration, first time after he got elected, when there was all this political posturing back and forth. And you know how the news media generally works, right? Is they cover that political posturing, that horse racing, that kind of internal politics, the personality of this stuff, and they kind of report on that. And they actually, that's what the kind of their business has become. I mean, most of the mainstream newspapers, especially TV news, they cover that back and forth. And I think for a long time at the nationwide level, it's like, people thought that this is just a political posturing going back and forth. It took a long time for it to sink in that, no, actually, this has become the new normal. It's the same kind of thing with Trump. We see the same thing with Trump. Everybody over this past summer, he's a flash in the pan, nothing's going to happen. And here the guy sits, we're getting ready to approach the first primaries and the first caucuses, and this guy's kind of in the lead. And still, you got people on the inside, the dominant media, just kind of trying to dismiss him without recognizing what's going on. And I fear that the same thing is happening here in Pennsylvania now. I mean, you've talked about this kind of, as a fear for a long time, say, fear that what's going to happen to Pennsylvania after Wolf was elected is the same thing that happened to Obama at the national level. And, I don't think the end of that chapter is written yet, exactly where we're going. But I think we're seeing a similar dynamic playing out. I mean, you saw that not only has the House Republicans proposed a counter budget that's lower than the Senate. The Senate has basically said, no, this is unworkable. You've also got the right-wing caucus, right, within the PA GOP has proposed their own budget, right, which is even lower than the House's alternative budget. So you're seeing that same kind of internal pressure, internal split that you see at the national level. We're seeing it at that state level. And frankly, you can see this coming from a mile away. And the real question comes whether we're going to get this budget or not. And if you recall, you thought this budget was going to be done by Pennsylvania Society. I was still pushing for the new year. So.
I did. I truly thought all the girls would want to go to the ball.
I know. And I was actually surprised that most of them stayed back too. That was pretty remarkable. I think maybe the pressure was a little bit too much of the photo ops of what it would look like for them to go. But
well, Scott Wagner was there.
Oh, of course, he can fly in his helicopter back and forth. I mean, after all, it gives him a nice view. He's got his own landing pad. You know that how it works.
He probably shacked up with Trump.
Yeah, I bet you. God, I don't even want to think about that. But I'll
that wasn't my thought, but thanks for that.
As part of it, looking here is, I'm at today is the I just handed in all my grades for the semester here out at Kutztown. And we're starting to look at kind of our own contract situation and where ABSCUF is with with the contract, all kind of tied up in this budget. And our organization is at that point now to say, okay, everyone thought we're gonna have, when the budget gets resolved, we have a contract. Here we are 6 months in, and that's just not going it. And it looks like the state is up to its same old shenanigans. So the organizing efforts are at least moving forward here with an ABSCUF to begin to kind of put some pressure upon our legislators and our the state administration to get this done, because you can kind of see the casualties falling all around us, and we certainly don't want to be one of them.
Yeah, I mean, look at this, and your organization, like a lot of them, and I've talked to a number of people recently who are all saying the same thing. If we don't get something done soon, we're going to have mass layoffs. There's going to be all this chaos, and having this, this kind of an impasse, this kind of a stalemate. Is not good for business, if you will, in Pennsylvania, and certainly not good for families across the Commonwealth.
No, it's not. And like we talked about last week, is we've already, students at the state system of higher education have already seen a 3.5% tuition increase because our good old legislators in Harrisburg couldn't get their act together and get a budget early on. You recall that Tom Wolf originally had proposed putting some money back to Pennsylvania's state system of higher education, to public higher ed in the state, and on the condition that the tuition would be frozen, fully recognizing that there was detrimental impacts to families and students across the state. But because our good folks in Harrisburg couldn't get it done, now again on the backs of students, that 3.5% increase. Some of the universities are now looking for ways to cover students' financial aid that is not coming through, in part because the state is holding up the budget. Universities are beginning thinking about how are they going to pay the bills from till next semester? Who's going to be starting to going on the rotating layoffs? Are they going to cut some faculty for the spring? Are they going to cut some staff for the spring? I mean, what's going to happen? I mean, that's the reality of where we are right now.
Yeah, and the other part of this is, there are a lot of school districts who are taking out loans. We're paying interest on those loans.
That's right.
I mean, that's money we shouldn't have to be spending that we're spending because they're not doing their job. And that's something I think taxpayers need to understand, that we're going to end up paying a lot more money than we need to because of this impasse.
That's absolutely right. And, I keep on thinking about that when I'm reading these stories about school districts that are taking out loans in order to kind of make payroll and a bunch of other stuff. I'm thinking, that these kind of austerity-minded people, the shock doctrine people that have been basically ruled our national and state politics for the past 8 years, these folks, they get their cake and they get to eat it every single step of the way. So even though now we elected, did the smart thing, at least in part, by electing a governor that wanted to do right by the people in this state, that the austerity people still get their cut and still get to bleed public institutions by not passing the budget. Because, even if we get that money reinstated, that interest is still going to fall on the back of the taxpayers, and it's going to on the back of those school districts, and it's going to have to come out of educating students. And based upon some of the schemes that we see that are going on, these privatization schemes, these charterization schemes, it looks like that we're not in for a good 2016 if things keep going in the way they're going.
Yeah, because almost immediately, even if they get it done before New Year's, immediately we're going to be talking about next year's.
That's right. That's right. That's absolutely right. And, and again, the narrative, and what's pretty remarkable for me is that, the narrative remains the same on the right wing side, right? State funding is bloated, or the state budget is bloated, and you got a good small government, and there's no money. And it seems like they can say this stuff over and over and over again, no matter how many times it's disproven. That narrative is disproven to show that they're basically lying to us all. But somehow that becomes a story that's easier to believe than the truth.
Yeah.
But the truth is that these people are manipulating our state government. They're manipulating our daily life. They're manipulating all our public institutions and making us pay for it so they can give their friends in high places, that top 1%, they can give them the largest cut so that they can fill their own coffers. I mean, that's the straightforward truth. That's a straightforward narrative that, in my mind, is a piece of cake to believe based upon all the evidence. Yet it seems like that austerity narrative, that austerity story, still holds sway, and that's concerning. And I'm, frankly, that's one of those things I just don't know exactly what to do about.
Yeah, well, they keep saying, we got to tighten our belts like you do at your kitchen table. Well, understand, our government isn't my kitchen table.
No, that's exactly right. And and again, it's not even just that question about just, them tightening belts. It's the willful denial of kind of what's actually going on is also kind of remarkable. I just give you the example from ABSCUF, right? So here we are, we're looking at 6 months without a contract. On February 1st, ABSCUF is planning a rally in the Capitol now, right? Basically saying we got to start putting pressure upon our state administrators. It would have been nicer to even do it sooner, but February 1st is something at least. At least we got that date to organize for. But you start going back over the history of what's going on here. We go back, if you remember, in 2013, Raging Chicken Press, we broke this story about these kind of Arthur Anderson accounting schemes that posh universities were going through. That was basically hiding money, diverting money from the education funds into building projects and pet projects, so that on the one hand you have the universities say that they're in crisis, that they have no money. On the other hand, they're building all these beautiful buildings and investing all this kind of stuff that they want to do. Right, this two set of books. Then we saw this past spring, right? We saw Colleen Bradley from Westchester University, the manager and the finances up there. She basically became a whistleblower and showed that Westchester University indeed had two sets of books. We found that universities, not just Westchester, but across the state system, were kind of having these quote unquote accounting budgets. Advocacy budgets, basically saying that these are the budgets that we're going to show to state legislators. These are the ones that we're going to show to the press to show them that we have no money. Meanwhile, we have our internal budget that shows the actual lumps of cash that we're sitting on top of. She blew the whistle. This past summer, ABSCUF President Ken Mash went to the Board of Governors, basically making the same kind of case, reminding them of this history. He did it again in October. And it's like you track this history the past several years, we've been able to make that case. Yet still, those people sitting in those boards of governors chairs, sitting at the state legislators, listening at the budget hearings, just refuse to even accept that as a narrative. They just think that we're just a bunch of greedy professors and they just want to get it done. Meanwhile, they're kind of like shifting all the money on, or all the burden of paying for higher education on the backs of students and their families, right? So that they can have these kind of lush green pastures for their PR materials. I mean, it's really remarkable. And this is from that inside perspective of what's happened in the state system of higher education, this kind of jewel in the Commonwealth. And that is happening, institution by institution, right? The facts don't seem to matter when it comes to these people.
And that's the scary part of it. And there's almost no one to hold them accountable when the facts don't add up.
No, there's not. It's either, and it really comes down, we can say this till we're blue in the face. It's either we're going to do it or nobody's going to do it, right? I don't care, there is no silver bullet here, right? There is no kind of savior that's going to come down and make everything better, right? This is the kind of nuts and bolts of kind of on the ground politics. And that's the only thing that's going to change it. Yeah. And, again, the jury is definitely out on whether that's going to happen. And just, I'm just got to get concerned about what's going to happen on the other side. That's why I got on my Christmas break reading list, I've got a whole bunch of dystopian science fiction novels lined up for there just so I can prepare myself.
There you go. And that's where I'm going to be going as well as we take off this week for our family vacation. And I wanted to, before we take off, I wanted to wish you and yours the best of holiday seasons, and also to thank you for coming on and talking to us. And I look forward to the Raging Chicken in the new year.
You got it, man. Well, have an awesome break, a wonderful holiday to you and the family, and you deserve it, man. And thanks for all that you do.
I appreciate it, Kevin. Thanks so much.
All right, Rick, take care.
Our good friend Kevin Mahoney, Raging Chicken Press Editor Zero, ragingchickenpress.org, the website. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Red roses too. I see them blue for me and you. And I say to myself, what a wonderful world.
Yes, it is all about the children, even after they're born. Rick Smith.
Don Blankenship did not get what he deserves in his federal trial, but he definitely deserves what he got. Guilty declared all 12 West Virginia jurors who pondered the charge that this arrogant and avaricious CEO of Massey Energy, Inc. willfully conspired to violate America's mine safety laws. As a result of that conspiracy, 29 miners were essentially murdered by the corporation on April 5, 2010, in a horrific explosion deep inside Massey's Upper Big Branch coal mine. Blankenship, a multimillionaire right-wing ideologue, union buster, and political heavyweight, ran the UBB mine like a lawless third-world operator. It was one of the most dangerous workplaces in the country because this kingpin of King Coal relentlessly put profit over people, recklessly endangering miners. But coal is, indeed, king in West Virginia, so the laws are written to coddle the royals of the industry. Thus, Blankenship's guilt is to be punished by a maximum of 1 year in prison, and his diamond-studded legal team intends to have the jury's unanimous verdict of guilt toss down the dark shaft of judicial favoritism for the rich. What the mining baron deserved was to be put in stocks on the state's capitol grounds, where he would be subjected to a steady stream of derision from the families of mine workers who were degraded, made ill, and even killed to haul up coal so Don could live in luxury. He escaped that justice, but he'll never shake off the guilty judgment of the jurors or of the American people who followed the month-long, widely covered trial that fully documented the rank immorality of this man and his ill-gotten fortune. This is Jim Hightower saying he undoubtedly thinks he got away with murder, but in the court of public opinion, his legacy is that he has turned the name Blankenship into a four-letter word.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
What the hell are we fighting for? Just to run around and want it all. Just got time to say.
So 400,000 jobs EPI is claiming between 2001 2013. In fact, what they're talking about is over 15% of the trade deficit with China. One company, 15.3% of the growth in the trade deficit that has ballooned from near even. We were near even when we started with China, the permanent normal trade relations. We began trade partner, all that stuff. In 2013, all the way up to $324 billion. We're well beyond that today. We are wow. We are so far beyond the $324 billion trade deficit with China today. This was only up until 2013. So that 400,000 job number that they're touting is actually even worse than that. Now, Walmart says it's flawed. It's a flawed system because understand, they're not saying we didn't lose 400,000 manufacturing jobs because of them. They're saying, sure, we lost those dirty manufacturing jobs. We lost those, but we have, supply chain jobs and logistic jobs and warehouse jobs and distribution jobs. Those ones that are paying like $9-10 an hour, if at that. Those port truck driving jobs that we've talked to so many port drivers over the years that are working at poverty wages because you've got these companies that keep making them independent contractors. Those folks. Yeah. Those are the ones we've traded those high paying unionized manufacturing jobs for. And there were people saying, well, that's good because we're going to save money. And I just had this debate over the last couple of days because the signing of NAFTA, the anniversary of that, I had someone say, well, Harvard says that, we've saved 12 to 13% on the cost of goods, and that's good for us, and it's good for the poor. And I go, yeah, but, we've had wage reductions of 15 to 20%. How is it good for us to lose 15 to 20% of our wages, yet somehow we make it up on the other? How's that better? And the answer is it's not. Now, according to EPI, they said the trade deficit that is rising is going to get worse in the coming years. Now, Walmart has said that they're going to create 1 million new jobs with this gimmick that they came out with to buy more American-made goods. Now, what EPI is saying, I'm saying, fine, that's great. Have the initiative, but the sad reality is the push for lower prices, the push for the path that we're going is going to probably create a deficit of even more jobs in the coming years that will offset any gains from what they actually create. And, I got to be honest, I actually believe that. I think I believe EPI over Walmart. What about you? Is what it is. Let's take a quick break. Right back.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. The United Steelworkers International Executive Board is urging rejection of the TPP trade deal. A formal resolution against the TPP said that the USW sought a trade agreement for the U.S. and Canada that would lift wages up rather than pushing them down, one that would reduce our nation's accumulated trade deficits that continue to mount, one that would promote domestic manufacturing and employment rather than more outsourcing and offshoring, one that would begin to reverse the widening gap of income inequality. Steelworkers President Leo Gerard, UAW President Dennis Williams, and Teamsters President Jim Hoffa co-wrote an opinion piece that concluded, quote, despite the efforts of supporters to frame this 12-nation Pacific Rim agreement as the gold standard and one that would stick up for the interest of millions of workers in the U.S. and abroad, the TPP fails on all counts. Senator Bernie Sanders is being virtually blacked out on corporate network news despite poll numbers showing he would fare better than Hillary Clinton against the GOP field of presidential contenders. This is despite Sanders drawing the biggest crowds and having poll numbers that equal Donald Trump's. The Tyndall Report, which tracks CBS, NBC, and ABC network news coverage, says that so far this year, ABC has devoted 81 minutes to Trump and a mere 20 seconds to Sanders. NBC gave Sanders 2.9 minutes, CBS 6.4 minutes through the end of November.
This is Mitch Lawrence with a Sports Minute for Workers Independent News. The National Football League is dealing these days with an alarming life and death issue, namely concussions. A lot of people think that the NFL has turned its back on many of its former players who have ended up after their careers with severe brain injuries, some of whom even took their own lives because they spent too much time using their heads as projectiles. There have been lawsuits against the NFL by scores of former players, and on Christmas Day, there will be the release of a new movie called Concussion, about how the league tried to cover up the extent of brain trauma injury. Clearly, this is no laughing matter, even if Roger Staubach tried to turn it into one the other night. During a black-tie dinner in New York, the former star of the Dallas Cowboys made a joke mocking his own history of concussion. By his own count, Staubach suffered at least 10 concussions back in the 60s and 70s as he was quarterbacking Dallas's 2 Super Bowl wins. Now he's the one making jokes, rather than being a spokesman for the players to address this serious issue. Staubach still has a lot of clout in football circles. He was called Captain America during his playing days because he was clean-cut and had played college football at the Navy Academy. Now he's doing a disservice to everyone and anyone who has ever paid a high price for playing pro football. It's no laughing matter, and Roger Staubach is the last one who needs to be reminded of that.
Brought to you by the IBEW, 750,000 men and women powering the way for an American comeback. Information on how to become an International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers Power Professional is online at ibew.org.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
We will have so much winning if I get elected that you may get bored with winning. Believe me, I agree. You'll never get bored with winning. We never get bored. We are going to turn this country around. We are going to start winning big leagues.
Yes, winning bigly. Gotta love that. And I can't believe I missed this doctor's report December 4th. And I'm not sure when it was released, but the Donald has put out his medical report. The doctor, I love the final line that Jacob Bornstein, MD from New York throws out there. He says, if elected, Mr. Trump, I can state unequivocally, will be the healthiest individual ever elected to the presidency. That's a pretty bold statement, and probably not a doctor I want to go to making those kind of statements. But there you go. Evidently, the Donald's in good shape, and good health, and all of that. Takes a statin drug, a little bit of aspirin every day, but other than that, strong as an ox and a horse, and all of that. And I care, not really. But it kind of shows just how crazy this whole cycle has gone. How crazy, and I think a lot of it's driven by Donald Trump. This is now turned really solidly into reality TV or the insanity that we've seen. But last week, the whole idea of a brokered convention came up, and a lot of people all tizzy, all in a frenzy, all worked up. I thought it'd be interesting to talk about how the right wing and their radio mouthpieces have been pushing the right wing there. So I've asked Tyler Cherry. He is a researcher over at Media Matters for America to come talk with us. Tyler, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you for having me.
So the Donald is the healthiest guy ever if he becomes president, huh?
I guess so. That's what his doctor's saying.
Is this not just nuts?
It has been quite the interesting primary. You've seen people of all political stripes, even on the right wing now coming out saying it was entertaining for a little bit, but once that rhetoric crossed a certain line, it like you said, it's gotten a little bit too out of hand, a little bit nuts.
And almost to the point where now the Republican establishment is saying, well, if there's really a shot of him being the guy, we may have to intervene, right?
Right. Well, this is the first time that it's come out publicly, but I'm sure that in the back room, this has been brewing for months and months. I'm sure they're shaking in their boots.
So walk me through some of the more outrageous claims, some of the folks who are running through and running with their hair on fire.
Of all the GOP candidates, or of just Donald Trump?
Well, of the talk world, of the folks who are out there with just. I got to be honest. I wish I were a right winger because there's so much stuff there.
Right. Well, we often see some of the most outrageous claims, some of the most ridiculous punditry coming from right-wing radio hosts. Rush Limbaugh, Laura Ingraham, and the likes. And then specifically about this, this brokered convention, and when that Washington Post article came out last week, we didn't really have anyone in TV media coming out and say anything, or print media, but it was exclusively, fomenting on the right-wing radio. Laura Ingraham called it a declaration of war against the Republican base. Mark Levin said that, the GOP establishment is now trying to thwart the will of Republican voters. They didn't take this news too lightly.
But, and looking at this and, with there being so many candidates, is this not time for maybe some of the ones at the bottom to fall away? Because look, we still have, the JV debates are still going on. I'm shocked that it's gone on this long.
Right. Well, you'd think hopefully after maybe tomorrow's debate, you'll see some people see the light and drop out from there. But, who knows? Maybe we'll end up at the Iowa caucuses and beyond with all 14 candidates.
Wow. Well, that would be fun sitting here, but I don't know for the party if that's a good thing. Look at the possibility of a brokered convention, which I got to be honest, from here, since we're going, would be kind of fun. But I don't know about good for our democracy, good for, I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Exactly. Well, this whole idea about a brokered convention, I mean, if you have the field decides that it is now continuing into the Iowa caucuses and beyond, extending past March into the later state primaries, there's most certainly going to be a contested convention, which is actually different than a brokered convention. A contested convention is just when no candidate has the majority in primary voting going into the convention, and I think it's in July. But once you get there, then the delegates vote at the convention again. And if no one wins on that first ballot, then it's a brokered convention. Regardless, it looks like both of them are going to be achieved. Step one, the contested convention, and step two, the brokered, with the field decides that it is now.
Is there really any, I mean, I got to be honest. I sit back and I go, is there really any chance that Donald Trump could be the guy? I mean, have we gone that far? Is our political system that broken that a TV reality star is now going to be the guy that it's going to be the leader of the free world?
Right. Well, I think, what we've seen this political cycle is that anything can happen. Expect the unexpected. To me, I personally am not all too surprised. I'm from California. I had, not when I was alive, but Ronald Reagan, before he was our governor, was a Hollywood actor. Arnold Schwarzenegger, who was our governor, was a Hollywood actor. So to me personally, I've seen this happen twice before, and to see Donald Trump do it just on a national stage and perhaps with, way worse rhetoric and policy positions. But in terms of what's possible in this political cycle, I think that all of our expectations and all of the standards that we typically hold have just been totally shattered.
Yeah, I think you hit an important part there, though, because it seems to me that Trump is the most sane and rational of the field. And I think that speaks a lot about the field.
Exactly. I mean, I think it's almost not that arguable that what he's saying on face value is probably the most dangerous and the harshest, but the scarier part is that every other, of one of his competitors and the other GOP candidates is saying essentially the same thing, just not with the bombast that he's saying. You have Donald Trump saying, let's ban all Muslims coming into the country, but just about every other Republican candidate has said something of the likes, whether it's a religious test for refugees, or if it's saying that a Muslim can't be president. They're all saying the same thing in different strokes. And like you said, perhaps Donald Trump is not the scariest because he's just coming out and outright saying it.
So let me ask you this, because, I have some Republican friends who were repulsed by the entire field. They all feel that their party has left them. And a lot of the polling that's being done is, the people who are paying attention now. How much of this maybe into the summertime changes because more people are starting to pay attention, that you don't have political junkies who are involved in it right now?
Right. Yeah. So right now, I think that the Republican primary is pandering to the people who are paying attention for the past, year. We have the longest election cycles ever. And there are, a committed group of conservative voters who will pay attention every day, day in and day out. But like you said, once it comes closer to the summer, there are plenty of, more centrist Republicans or people who, just don't keep up with the politics every day who will be tuning in, obviously, because voting comes pretty quickly from there. So, for all we know, it could stay the same, and for all we know, it could change and flip itself on its head. So, like I said earlier, we have all of our expectations about this political cycle have totally been blasted, and I think going forward, we just kind of have to take it as it comes, because even the political insiders, the experts, really have no idea how to confront what's going on.
Now, I was telling a friend of mine on Saturday that I still think Mitt Romney's going to throw in at some point because, hey, all the other look. Did you see the Saturday Night Live skit with Will Ferrell? George W. Bush is coming back. Why not mittens?
Right. Well, who knows? Maybe we come to a convention in July and they just throw his name in there. You never know at this point.
Yeah, I mean, this is just a crazy cycle, and you're right. Nobody knows what's next, and nobody has any idea of what's coming, which is what makes this one kind of interesting, but scary all the same.
Right.
So last question I've got for you. Let's say we end up into this brokered convention. We end up towards this. Is it the end of the Republican Party? I mean, do they really just shred themselves?
This is actually, in the words of Republicans and some super right-wing commentators, and not me, but I have seen people on the right saying this could be it. This could be not the end of the GOP politically, but of the GOP ideologically. And that this could represent, I know that there's a lot of anger in the base because of they put forth, John McCain, who didn't win, Mitt Romney, who didn't win, because the establishment insisted that they put forward a more establishment centrist candidate. And, if we get to that convention and they nominate someone on the super right wing, Donald Trump, Ted Cruz, whoever it may be, perhaps you see a big crack up in the party. We had Laura Ingraham on her radio show today say that same very thing. This could, come July, be the big crack up of the Republican Party as we know it today. So I guess we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see if Donald runs as an independent when they shun him aside.
Yeah, that also has them shaking in their boots, I'm sure.
Which would kill them. I mean, there's no way they could win an election that way. Interesting stuff, and I'm glad you guys are paying attention to it. Thanks so much. I appreciate you taking time for us, Tyler. Great talking with you. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show.
And the bills are creeping through the door. It's desperate times, so desperate measures we explore. Marching on the Capitol to lobby leaders for involvement. 3,000 people screaming out, "Where's our government?" Lawsuits and arraignments, members under company surveillance. Public divided, either they love us or they hate us. Profit billions off our backs, and it's still not enough. They should have took into account that we never give up. We'll be here one day longer. One day longer. The people's voice is stronger. We work hard for our money, we work hard for respect. Keep fighting for these rights for generations, it's next. One day longer. One day longer. The people's voice
Your
is
working class
stronger.
radio experience, where hard work, common sense, and rational thought are a reality. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1990. That was the day that 20,000 workers in the city of Fez, in the North African country of Morocco, went out on strike. Austerity measures had hit the country's working people hard during the 1980s. A drought had made the situation even worse. Unemployment rates for those under 21 had soared to higher than 30%. Two labor unions, the General Workers' Trade Union and the Democratic Confederation of Labor, called for a general strike. Government officials agreed to meet with the unions to discuss their demands, but the government would not agree to specific wage increases. Plans for the general strike moved forward. It is estimated that more than half of the Fez workforce participated in the general strike. Large numbers of workers in other Moroccan cities also participated in the action. In Fez, bus drivers showed their solidarity by joining the strike. In response, the government attempted to keep bus service going by putting police and soldiers behind the wheel. This angered many of the young demonstrators, and some threw stones at the scab drivers. Armed forces clashed violently with the strikers. The government claimed the strikers started the violence. The protesters pointed toward the police. A fire was started at the 5-star Hotel Menendez in Fez. Other symbols of wealth, such as limousines, car dealerships, and banks, were also damaged. After the 24-day strike, Moroccan officials claimed that 2 demonstrators had been killed. But human rights groups disputed that number and said 33 had been killed. Many more were injured. Hundreds were arrested. After the strike, the government agreed to raise wages by 15%. Many protesters were tried for their participation in the demonstrations. Some received prison sentences as long as 10 years. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Tales of American Political History with Clinton Porter Hackney.
Let's face it, if you're President of the United States, you just can't avoid controversy. Today we begin the tale of how not even the White House Christmas tree can escape political controversy. Yes, even the official White House Christmas tree has found itself under the clouds of political storms. And who had the first official White House Christmas tree anyway, whatever official means? The consensus is that the first official White House Christmas tree was the Hoover's tree in 1929, but we aren't certain as to what was required for the tree to be designated as official. What about President Benjamin Harrison's trees in the 1880s? What was unofficial about his? Some sources say President Pierce had a White House Christmas tree as early as 1853, and you can even find a reference to President Tyler having one in the 1840s. Join us again next time for more real Christmas tree controversy. This is Clinton Porter Hackney at cphackney.com.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
We make Pennsylvania happen!
Taxes too high, wages too high. We're not going to be able to compete against the world. I hate to say it, but we have to leave it the way it is. People have to go out, they have to work really hard, and they have to get into that upper stratum.
Everything's raising but the wages. Everything's raising but the wages. Gasoline, groceries, and our hazy.
I got to tell you, it's kind of scary prospect there. And talking with Tyler, the reality is what happens if the GOP does implode and faction off. How much crazier could they get? I mean, how much further off the rails can we go? Honestly, I mean, at what point? Listen to the rhetoric. And I was just having this conversation this morning over at the Ironworkers Hall for their Christmas party. And I said, the Republican Party that most of my friends think they are has been long dead. The reality is, just send out the Eisenhower letter that he sent to his brother that said any politician who comes out against unemployment, Social Security, labor laws, the Farm Bill, anybody who comes out against those things, their numbers are negligible and they're stupid. They're right now stupid running the party, running the Republican Party and playing it out every single day. There used to be a time where we thought you worked hard, you played by the rules, you got ahead. There used to be a time where we thought of community and charity and the idea that if you got sick, you didn't lose your home. We used to have some, common thoughts. It seems that, and I don't know is it our education system? Is it the media? Is it just we're brain dead? I don't know. But you sit down and you have conversations with people who you go, where exactly did that come from? And we're really kind of heading into very scary times. It's troubling. Really, really very troubling. I don't know if you saw the Saturday Night Live skit. I did find it quite humorous. Will Ferrell does, I think, probably the best George W. Bush out there. Evidently, he's now running, which it kind of makes me chuckle in a way. But why not? As crazy as this time around has been, but a few of the lines just slayed me. The one about Ben Carson, he goes, "Well, I can barely hear him," and the people in China are going to need you to speak up so you can understand them. I thought that was funny because we're Americans are loud, and if they don't understand the language, we just scream at them. I thought that was funny. I did think it was as Farrell pointed out, a pretty good twist that George looks like the smart one now. And he went after the exclamation point, which I went after immediately. But I liked his analogy. He goes, just because you put an exclamation point after broccoli doesn't mean I'm going to like it if you call it broccoli. And I kind of agree with that. But the last line just kind of sent me off the deep end. He was talking about his brother, and knowing how to run government and being the steady hand, and kind of like a bus driver, driving the bus and steady hand, get you on there on time. And he says, but only gets into 1 or 2 accidents a year, but not more than 4. That just sent me into the chuckle range. But really, I mean, how crazy can we get? How far off the rails will we go? And I look at the conversations around this brokered convention. The idea that, wow, Donald Trump could actually be the guy. And I started thinking back to 1980. The Carter people wanted Reagan because they thought the American people, would realize that he was a crank and that he was way off, and basically his ideas would be very harmful. And they got crushed because that simplistic message that, everybody thinks Reagan was this big tough guy. The media, the story. The second that Reagan's hand touched the Bible to be sworn in, the hostages in Iran were released. And then you find out years later that the hostage takers actually wanted to get rid of the hostages months earlier. And there's a whole conspiracy theory around that, and you can believe it or not. And I don't necessarily, but it's plausible when you think that, George H.W. Bush was the head of the CIA for a while, that the messaging, the optics, kind of make you question. How is it the second that the second his hand touches the Bible, they're running through the streets? Because it makes for good imaging. It makes for a good TV movie. It makes us think he's the guy. And Trump tried to play on that as well with Iran again. I'm often taken by just kind of how simplistic the message can be sometimes and how we buy into it. So I guess I shouldn't be surprised that Donald is leading. I guess I shouldn't be. The healthiest man to ever hold the office. Have you seen this? I mean, it's really kind of funny. This doctor actually wrote a letter to the American people, basically to whom it may concern, on his letterhead, saying that he was Donald's doctor from 1980. His father was Donald's doctor back for the years before that, and he's pleased to report that Mr. Trump has no significant medical problems. He has had a recent complete medical exam that showed only positive results. Actually, his blood pressure, 110/65, and lab tests were astonishingly excellent. They weren't just good, they were astonishingly excellent. Over the past 12 months, they claim Donald has lost at least 15 pounds. Donald takes 81 milligrams of aspirin daily and a low dose of a statin. His PSA score is 0.15, which he puts in parentheses, very low. His physical strength and stamina are extraordinary. Yeah. I got to be honest. I think this is the kind of medical record that they would absolutely have to have for Donald, because you need those extra words to make him feel better. He goes on to say Donald has suffered from no form of cancer, has never had a hip, knee, or shoulder replacement or any other orthopedic surgery. His only surgery was an appendectomy at the age of 10. His cardiovascular status is excellent. He has no history of ever using alcohol or tobacco products. If elected, Mr. Trump, I can state unequivocally, will be the healthiest individual ever elected president. Signed, I'm not sure which one it is, but I guess it's Harold. Signed Harold N. Bornstein. It's Jacob and Harold. I guess probably they're brothers who do the medical thing there. So there you go. The Donald, the healthiest guy ever. And I got to tell you, I think George W. Bush would kind of push back on that, because W used to have his 2 or 3 hours of biking and whatever else he was doing. I would think W would be the healthiest president. Just kind of my thought. If we need to go into that direction, and I hope we don't. Anyway, but fun. I cannot wait. I'm personally hoping for the brokered convention. Looking forward to heading to Cleveland for that big convention. I think it's in July. And that would wouldn't that not be the greatest thing? To see basically a public pie fight of all of the craziness. Because I think that's what everyone's waiting for. Everyone's waiting for Trump to implode and then for them to be Johnny on the spot. And some of the polls that I've seen, there were a couple that show Cruz. There was one I saw. I think it was the Monmouth poll that showed Cruz up in Iowa. But the rest of them have Trump solidly ahead of everybody. That's wow. Now, does this become a situation where the media has made him, because he's really done the rounds? You got to give him credit. He is everywhere. This guy is a chronic workaholic. When do they turn on him? What they giveth, they sometimes taketh away. So it'll be interesting to see where that goes, especially into the new year. Fun. I cannot wait. Anyway, we're going to be taking a couple of weeks off. We're going to be until the new year. We are going away, going to do that thing. But we're going to be rebroadcasting our People's Tour, the Labor History Tour, starting Wednesday. We're going to run it all the way through to the end of the year. So if you missed our tour back in August, here's the opportunity to catch up on it. And if you were there here then, it'll be a good chance to pick up on the parts that you missed the last time. So I'm looking forward to that. And I know that some of the people that I've talked to recently have said, yeah, I missed this or I missed that. Well, it's all going to be there starting Wednesday. through to the end of the year. Good stuff. Let's take a quick break. When we come back and talk a little bit about what's going on down in Philly with education. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
There's a flaw in the system, and the fly in the ointment is gonna bring the whole thing down. The gates are open, we've let the demons loose. The big guns have spoken, and we've fallen for the ruse.
We will not sign off on any agreement that represents a certain extinction of our people.
UN climate talks stall on temperature target.
There is a civil or criminal violation that arises from what they did, then it should be pursued.
Hillary Clinton calls for prosecuting ExxonMobil. Climate denier academics caught soliciting payments from fossil fuel interests. Plus,
I've never heard anything quite so ridiculous.
Rush Limbaugh's guest host given U.S. Senate platform to deny climate change.
Dittos. All of those stories and more straight ahead. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Some insist time to avoid catastrophe is running out. Others are really stupid.
Not to put too fine a point on it, this is your Green News Report.
Ridiculously earth-shatteringly stupid.
I'm gonna soak up the sun.
Okay, Desi Doyen, 195 countries, 21 years in the making. Just hours left. Will all of these nations be able to come together to come up with one single global treaty to keep the Earth from becoming unlivable?
I'm pretty sure they'll come up with a treaty. The question is, will it be a good one? They are pulling overnighters as we go to air at the United Nations climate talks in Paris. Officials are negotiating that comprehensive agreement for all nations to cut global greenhouse gas emissions. A major conflict. Island nation states and low-lying developing nations are calling for the official target of global temperatures to rise no more than 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial times. That's a goal much harder to meet than the current target of 2 degrees Celsius. That's because, as UN consultant Dr. Hugh Seeley of the island nation of Grenada said on the broadcast this week, these nations will disappear under rapidly rising seas.
Climate change is an existential threat. This is not something that's an economic issue for us. This is an existential issue for us. So our backs are literally against the wall on this one, and therefore we will fight for our existence. We will fight for 1.5 to be anchored in the agreement.
The deadline for the talks is Friday. The conference could very well go into overtime. We'll have the thrilling conclusion of the fate of our world in our next episode. Here in the U.S., oil giant ExxonMobil is in damage control over revelations that it misled investors and the public on the science of climate change. And now in a video posted by climate activist group 350.org, Democratic presidential candidate Hillary Clinton at a town hall-style campaign event this week said she supports prosecution of Exxon.
I want us to be looking at what ExxonMobil told their shareholders, told the public. And so, if there is a civil or criminal violation that arises from what they did, then it should be pursued.
Exxon's own scientists, as early as 1977, understood what was going on with the increase of carbon in the atmosphere. They understood that the results, if we kept burning this carbon into the atmosphere, would be, quote, catastrophic. They said it over and over again, and then Exxon spent millions to obscure that science. They need to be held accountable as any other public company would be held accountable for lying to the public and to shareholders. So, no, I'm not unhappy at all that the heat is on ExxonMobil. Hold them accountable, just the way Big Tobacco was held accountable for lying to the public.
Meanwhile, 2 prominent U.S. professors have been caught soliciting payment from fossil fuel interests in exchange for casting doubt on climate change.
Wait, can we do that?
We could, but I wouldn't want to.
Oh, I could use the money.
Well, anyway, undercover Greenpeace activists posed as fossil fuel industry consultants seeking academic papers claiming that rising CO2 levels are good for the planet. 2 American academics offered to write those reports in exchange for payments of as much as $15,000. The investigation exposes how the fossil fuel industry can easily insert bought and paid for climate change denial into the public domain without the public knowing the true source of the funding.
Nice work if you can get it.
Finally, Republican Senator and presidential candidate Ted Cruz is apparently running out of actual climate scientists to deny climate change. So at his Senate Science Committee hearing on Tuesday, Cruz called on right-wing pundit Mark Stein to testify against the national security threat posed by climate change.
We are planning now for global security threats a century hence, because the Maldives might have been swept away by water by then. The entire population of the Maldives are all Sunni Muslim, so they'll fit in perfectly fine if they all move to this Brussels suburb that produced the shooters in Paris.
What the hell is he talking about?
That's a good question.
And that was a hearing on climate science?
In the Senate.
Well, I guess they couldn't get Rush Limbaugh himself. They had to get his guest host, Mark Stein. What a world. For much more on all of the stories we covered today and the ones we couldn't get to, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find us and follow us on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Nice work if you can get it, and if you get it, won't you tell me how?
If the only choice available were public schools, we'd have better public schools. But the wealthy in many, many cities have opted out of the public school system. I mean, they may vote for the bond issues out of conscience, and some of them may engage philanthropically. But with their own kids, they send them to private schools. And by having this division, essentially between rich and poor in schools, the rich get the education they want to get for their kids, and a lot of them have a conscience, so they try to do something for somebody else, but they don't try the same way as they would as if the kids were in those schools.
So today's headline from the Miami Herald, and talking about charter schools, Florida, they say, gave charter schools millions of dollars before they closed. And, you look at Florida as one of those places where the charter schools just kind of exploded. And the millions of dollars that were spent, and I would argue wasted, because at the end of the day, the field is littered with, we had an idea, we tried to do the school, but, well, it didn't happen. And you look at the millions of dollars of taxpayer dollars, money wasted, and really the lives of the kids who, well, it didn't work out. Sorry, good luck, better luck, maybe next time. And, I keep thinking about that frontier virtual cyber charter school that was run out of Philadelphia, where they had 52 kids, and they talked all about the money. What about those 52 kids who didn't get an education? So when I see that the stories are out there, hey, more charter schools, I have a visceral repulsion to the idea of more charter schools. And I understand tomorrow there's a big event in Philadelphia, because here again, you've got the charter addicts pushing more charter schools. And there's a big event at the John Wister Elementary School, which I guess is the next one on the list to be charterized, or the next one to be pushed in that direction. That's why I've asked Robin Lowry, she's a teacher at the Wister Elementary School, to come talk to us about tomorrow night's event and really just, what's going on there with the charter situation. Robin, thanks for taking time for us.
No problem.
So walk me through this. You've got the public school there. It seems to be doing well, I guess. No?
Well, we have been working really hard with the resources that have been cut over the last 5 years. We're still making what the district average would be. We're making slightly above average using the PVAS score, which is a student tracked data. But again, we're doing this with resources that we've lost about 26 adults and 4 different programs, before and after school programs, also in the last 5 years. So we're really struggling to make make achievement gains.
So the solution is not let's get those 27 adults back, not let's get those programs back, but the solution is let's hand this off to one of these charter companies.
Right, and it's not just Wister. And I heard you ask that question at this simultaneous announcement the district made. They on October 1st, they chose Wister in Germantown, Huey in West Philadelphia, and Cook in the Olney section, a middle school, to go through this Renaissance transformation, which was they were seeking vendors, they call them, charter companies, to come over and make offers to take over these schools because they've declared us to be failing schools.
So tell me about the student body. I mean, because, it sounds to me that they're choosing your school for a reason. I have to wonder why.
Well, Rick, I mean, you're asking the right question, because this is not the first time I've gone through this. I was at Simon Gratz High School for 10 years, and 5 years ago, it was also allowed to just completely collapse under its own weight because of a loss of resources and good administrators removed and inexperienced administrators put in. And then the same pattern. We were declared failures, and then mastery was given our school. Same pattern here at Wister. When I arrived at Wister after leaving Gratz, we had a lot of adults. We had a lot of programs. The school was really run well, and the school still is run well, but it's with less and less. And then once again, they've cherry-picked a few neighborhoods where some of these charter companies feel like, A, there's not a lot of parent involvement, B, you can use these test scores to say, look at the district's average and your students aren't at that average if you use your data. And that's what they're using. So the district came when we had our back-to-school night September 30th. October 1st, the district sends the staff a letter, as well as at dismissal hands out flyers to parents saying that because our school was failing and because we had a climate problem and a few other factors that they didn't disclose, they were seeking vendors to take over our school, and they would be allowing parents to choose among a panel of maybe 6 vendors. They couldn't say exactly how many different charter schools would be vying. So that's where we've been since we found out at that time that we were going to be possibly turned into a charter. We've been fighting back.
That seems, honestly, that sounds kind of nuts. But I understand the vote happened, and it was like a 2-to-1 vote to leave the school right where it is into the hands of the public, right?
Well, let me explain that vote. 2 years ago, when they tried this same tactic at Steele Elementary School, which is a feeder school to Gratz High School, the district gave the parents the choice to vote either to remain public or to become a charter. The parents at Steele and Mayor's Muniz, another school in the Olney section, similar, both schools, the parents voted in this legitimate vote that the district had to stay public. This time, with this turnaround plan for these 3 schools, parents were not given the choice to choose between staying public or going charter. They were only given this choice to choose between the charter providers. Well, that's another story. The vote that we did have was during parent conferences, we created a little ballot and asked parents 4 questions. Where do you stand? Do you want to remain public? At this point, we knew that Mastery had been in the press as the charter that was going to take over, so it was no longer a mystery of who the 6 vendors were. We knew it was Mastery. So on this survey, we put public, Mastery, want more information, and we were also having parent meetings. So were you aware that there were parent meetings? So the results of that, we had 131 surveys returned, and by a 2/3 margin, parents want to remain public. A lot of our parents also just checked they want more information. They're in what's happening right now as we speak. Mastery is going around to the neighborhood around Wister and holding petitions that say Save Wister and having parents sign that petition. This is what we were told just today by a parent in the neighborhood. And only when they go to sign the petition do they realize that they're actually signing something from Mastery.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you listen, you hear that story, and look, this isn't the first time this has happened. This is something that's played out all across the country. And to me, I got to ask the question, if they're claiming that they're going to do better, show me the results.
Exactly.
And because, the only reasonable studies that I've seen, I saw one out of Stanford University that I give some weight to, that showed that, in the vast majority of the cases, these charter schools don't do any better. In a large number of cases, they do worse. And in a handful of cases, they do better.
Right.
What are they bringing to the table to me that's going to be any better? And look, we still need the resources. That's, at the end of the day, the important part of it.
Exactly. And, charters, because they were originally set up to be innovative little schools where you could just get away from some of the rules surrounding schools and create something innovative. It became a huge access road for getting private companies and charters to go in and turn around these public schools. What's happening is, now that we see that, as you say, it's not just a Wister problem, it's not a Philly problem, it's a national problem. One of the things is that charters are operating in this quasi-public status. When it comes time for transparency, for example, you go to the school district's website and you see the school progress report for all schools in Philadelphia. There's a whole page on teacher effectiveness. All of the schools in the public school system in the school district report that data.
Right.
All of the Mastery charter schools, which are still included on that list, and they claim that they're public schools, they don't declare any of that data.
Because it's proprietary. We don't have to share any of our business models.
But yet, there have been parent meetings that I've attended where, and even a community meeting with a council person, where the Mastery and the charter people, they're constantly trying to assure the parents that we're public schools too. Charter schools are public schools. At the SRC meeting last month, Dr. Haidt and the SRC Commission stood in front of the whole audience and declared that charter schools are public schools.
No, they're publicly funded schools. There's a huge difference.
They are publicly funded, and that's about as far as it goes.
Yeah, it's a huge difference between being publicly funded and actually being a public entity.
Exactly.
And that's one of the things that's frustrating about this. And while at the beginning I was a charter school supporter, let's try things a little differently.
Sure, absolutely.
Kids learn different paces, different ways. That's great stuff. We should be doing it. But what it's quickly turned into is, it's big business now. It's not about educating kids. It's about putting, names on a balance sheet.
Absolutely. And in addition, what schools are competing on now is not whether kids are happy and enjoying school. They're competing on these bubble tests, mostly published by Pearson, huge billion-dollar education company. So they're competing on these bubble tests. And so Mastery, and I have many students who I've known from Gratz and I've known at Wister who've gone on to Mastery because it's really one of the only games in town. That's the other thing with having it take over your neighborhood. It's the only game in town. And they spend their day on math and reading and gaming these tests, getting help, preparing these tests, getting ready to take tests. One of the big charter companies in New York, Success Academy, one of their little blurbs that got out to the public was they were creating little test-taking machines. That's what their students were. And so, yes, they're not creating anything unique or something innovative that teaches children in a new way or speaks to children's desire to learn. They're competing right now, and they're competing on these test scores. They're also competing with structure. And one of our parents who's most concerned, because her children should already be going to Pastorius, which is a Mastery school, she chose not to go to Mastery Pastorius and brought her kids to Wister. One of the things that concerned her is that at dismissal, there are armed guards outside of Pastorius. One of the things that my students from Gratz, when they first transitioned to Mastery, and I was like, how's it going at Mastery? I was curious. Oh, they just come up with rules after rules after rules. We can't talk in the hall. We have to walk with our hands behind the back. So what they do, these charters, first thing they do is clamp down on student behaviors. And any kids that don't toe that line,
they oust.
They're out.
Yep.
And they're out to the public schools, or now Mastery has created this other alternative school across the street where kids will go and sit in that building for a week until they earn their way back into the building. That's the only thing they're offering.
Wow.
Help taking bubble tests and, such strict rules that if you don't have a belt on, your parents get a call, you got to be picked up.
Now, do the parents see this? I mean, because at some point you've got to imagine that the gig is up, and then people start realizing. Because I mean, look, it sounds appealing. You've got a public school that's underfunded, that's struggling to make payroll, that's always, who knows how long before they have to shut the doors, and the promise of a bright new school with shiny faucets and all that stuff seems appealing.
Absolutely. And at Gratz, they kept the football program. At Imhotep, they built up the basketball program. Kids want to go to the school that's got the top basketball program.
Right.
So they're using those as lures. Absolutely. When they took over Gratz, they threw everything out. We tried to take as much out of there, but even still, they just took everything and just stripped it. And it looks beautiful. Of course, that's appealing. But the difference between 5 years ago when they took over Gratz and now is just as you say. Parents are they've had experience with their kids at Mastery. They see, why aren't they expanding this to Chestnut Hill? Why isn't Mastery going into Lower Merion? Why are they picking our neighborhoods? So the parents are much savvier now. They get it. And at every community meeting I've been to, where it was just a room with a presenter talking about, a couple of them were just like showing data of how Wister is failing using bogus data, but that's a whole nother story. As soon as I say, wait a minute, that's not the correct data. They've taken our resources. They label us failing. Every head, every voice in the room is like, turns and says, you get it.
Yeah.
You get it instantly.
Yeah. My other question is we see in like places like Milwaukee where companies, these charter companies go out and they're actually buying people. I know in Milwaukee, they were actually given $100 for people to sign their kids up. That's how little they think of, the parents think of their kids' education.
Well, we do have this rally tomorrow prior to the meeting with Mastery in the district at 6:00. But we also, at the SRC meeting on Thursday, we've been gathering support, and we got a bus donated from a local school to go down there. And today, again, in an email of parents just connecting and saying, wait a minute, look, this was put in my door today. Mastery is offering a bus and dinner. So we're like, oh man, we're not offering dinner. We just offered a bus, At the community meeting last week, it was, and I went to it, and it was advertised, dinner will be served. And Mastery was there offering to take parents on tours of all of their Mastery schools, and breakfast, lunch, transportation was provided. And I'm like, okay, and how many 50s did they slip into pockets?
Yeah.
They've got a lot of walking around money, because right now, this is where they are trying to gain as much territory as possible.
Yeah. I love when my tax dollars are used like that.
Yeah. Well,
because that's what it is.
They have a lot of private funds coming from hedge fund operators who really want to see public education turned private, because there's a big money maker. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry.
Yep. The
Walton family, the Gates family, the Broad family, they're all funding everything that needs to be done to win this hearts and mind thing right now.
That's amazing.
And in our own state house, over the weekend, there's a bill that they're trying to push through, and I'm worried it could happen at any time, where the state can now close the 5 lowest performing schools in Philadelphia, nowhere else, just Philadelphia. And, they're going to close them, label kids failing, label teachers failing, just like at Wister, not offer anything, not ask the teachers, what do you need to reach your kids? Just take those schools, give them to a charter provider. And if I can just go on for one more thing, the charter company that wants to take over Huey Elementary in West Philadelphia, Great Oaks Charter,
right?
They're from the Midwest. One of the new superintendents of the opportunity districts in the school district, a new position just created in the last
opportunity district. Love that. Go ahead.
Yes. Well, the person who is the opportunity district superintendent is on the board of Great Oaks Charter.
Doesn't seem to be a little bit of a conflict of interest there, is
you
there?
would think, but we have a member of the SRC right now, Ms. Jimenez, who the Alliance for Philadelphia Public Schools has been petitioning Governor Wolf to get her off, because her husband works for a charter school.
Beautiful. A whole incestuous pool right there.
And you know what, if I could just say one more thing, you know, at every one of these meetings, and there are two things that come up, two buzzwords. One, they're trying to say, oh, charters are public. The other thing is, every time a teacher like myself or someone else stands up to question someone, the phrase they use is, this can't be about adults. This is not about adults. This is about children.
It's all about the children.
Meanwhile, I'm in the classroom every day. I'm playing the children game, but I've had to step out of that role to battle these adults and their duplicitousness.
Yeah, it's all about the children until you start talking about, well, we need resources.
Yeah,
we need a roof that doesn't leak. We need books that aren't 20 years old. We need desks that don't fall apart. We need computers.
And teachers, when we talk about class sizes, like, well, you know, one of the things when Dr. Haidt first came, and he, you know, they stopped abiding by the PFT contract, the union contract. They want to get rid of it, and he laid out a whole list of proposals. And one of them is that class size should not be part of our teaching contract.
Wow.
Yeah, I understand that. But if we did not have class size limits written into our contract, who knows how many kids would be in a class?
No, you'd be like Detroit. They had a kindergarten class with 52 kids in it. The fire department had to actually come in and rule it a fire hazard so that they would stop. So let me ask you a last question then.
Yeah.
What do we do to help? How do you stop this? What's the response?
Well, you know, it's not just happening at Wister. We're having a rally tomorrow. We want as many people in our walkway at 5:15 to just show mastery in the district that we are onto their game. It's happening at Cook and Huey. You can check in and see when their rallies are going to be. They're happening. They're having a parent vote tomorrow, and then from that they're going to also mobilize. The SRC meeting on Thursday, once a month. Our vote for these 3 turnaround schools doesn't happen until next month. In the meanwhile, talk to everybody. Read and educate yourself about what's happening in Harrisburg in terms of bills that are being passed that are just, you know, slippery ways to, again, defund and destroy public education.
And of course, to continue to push these charters, because the moneyed interest, they know what they want.
Oh, absolutely. That's why Pearson spun off the Economist magazine and Financial Times, because there's no money in publications anymore. They're into testing and teacher evaluation tests. They run almost all of our IT now at the district. DianeRavich.net. She's an education historian. She has a daily blog that just gives you a great snapshot of stuff happening all over, articles from all over the country. And
she's fantastic.
Diane Ravich.
We've had her on the program in the past.
Fabulous.
She's fantastic.
Yes, she's a gem.
And in the next hour, we're going to be picking up with a couple of educators to talk about high stakes testing as well. But Robin, I appreciate you taking time for us. Is there a website that we can go to get more information?
We have a Facebook page, Save, all caps, Wister Elementary School. And then there's always the Alliance for Philadelphia Public School webpage, as well as Defend Public Education. There's a lot of information on that one. Ken Durstein's Defend Public Education.
We will make sure we get links to that. Robin, thank you so much for taking time for us. Great talking with you, Robin Lowry. Let's take a quick break. Right back in the next hour. We're going to be picking up on high stakes testing. You're going to want to stick around for that. Quick break. Right back.
Don Blankenship did not get what he deserves in his federal trial, but he definitely deserves what he got. Guilty declared all 12 West Virginia jurors who pondered the charge that this arrogant and avaricious CEO of Massey Energy, Inc. willfully conspired to violate America's mine safety laws. As a result of that conspiracy, 29 miners were essentially murdered by the corporation on April 5, 2010, in a horrific explosion deep inside Massey's Upper Big Branch coal mine. Blankenship, a multimillionaire right-wing ideologue, union buster, and political heavyweight, ran the UBB mine like a lawless third-world operator. It was one of the most dangerous workplaces in the country because this kingpin of king coal relentlessly put profit over people, recklessly endangering miners. But coal is, indeed, king in West Virginia, so the laws are written to coddle the royals of the industry. Thus, Blankenship's guilt is to be punished by a maximum of 1 year in prison, and his diamond-studded legal team intends to have the jury's unanimous verdict of guilt tossed down the dark shaft of judicial favoritism for the rich. What the mining baron deserved was to be put in stocks on the state's capitol grounds, where he would be subjected to a steady stream of derision from the families of mine workers who were degraded, made ill, and even killed to haul up coal so Don could live in luxury. He escaped that justice, but he'll never shake off the guilty judgment of the jurors or of the American people who followed the month-long, widely covered trial that fully documented the rank immorality of this man and his ill-gotten fortune. This is Jim Hightower saying he undoubtedly thinks he got away with murder, but in the court of public opinion, his legacy is that he has turned the name Blankenship into a four-letter word.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
On June 25, 1938, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt signed the Fair Labor Standards Act into law. Viewed as one of the final pieces of legislation of FDR's New Deal and the single most worker-friendly piece of legislation ever written, the Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938 was a victory not only for labor unions, but for workers, families, and children across the country. FDR called the new law the most far-reaching, far-sighted program for the benefit of workers ever adopted in this or any other country. This visionary piece of legislation put a ceiling over hours and a floor under wages, mandating a 44-hour work week, a 25-cent minimum wage, and time and a half for overtime. The Fair Labor Standards Act was later amended to 40 hours per week and 40 cents per hour. The law also excluded children from working dangerous jobs and set standard conditions for the employment of child workers to avoid continued exploitation of children. The Fair Labor Standards Act has been changed or amended at least 43 different times. These alterations have been used both to expand worker protections, such as raising the minimum wage, prohibiting age discrimination, and requiring equal pay, and to restrict and take away protections such as the Taft-Hartley Act and the 2004 Fair Pay Amendment. Today, we take the 40-hour work week, minimum wages, overtime, and child labor protections for granted. But up until the passage of the Fair Labor Standards Act, workers were at the mercy of their employers and children were dying in industrial accidents. This Rick Smith Show Labor History Moment was made possible by a grant from the Labor Education Center at IUP. For more information, visit www.thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. The United Steelworkers International Executive Board is urging rejection of the TPP trade deal. A formal resolution against the TPP said for the U.S. and Canada that would lift wages up rather than pushing them down, one that would reduce our nation's accumulated trade deficits that continue to mount, one that would promote domestic manufacturing and employment rather than more outsourcing and offshoring, one that would begin to reverse the widening gap of income inequality. Steelworkers President Leo Gerard, UAW President Dennis Williams, and Teamsters President Jim Hoffa co-wrote an opinion piece that concluded, quote, despite the efforts of supporters to frame this 12-nation Pacific Rim agreement as the gold standard and one that would stick up for the interest of millions of workers in the U.S. and abroad, the TPP fails on all counts. Senator Bernie Sanders is being virtually blacked out on corporate network news despite poll numbers showing he would fare better than Hillary Clinton against the GOP field of presidential contenders. This is despite Sanders drawing the biggest crowds and having poll numbers that equal Donald Trump's. The Tyndall Report, which tracks CBS, NBC, and ABC network news coverage, says that so far this year, ABC has devoted 81 minutes to Trump and a mere 20 seconds to Sanders. NBC gave Sanders 2.9 minutes, CBS 6.4 minutes through the end of November.
This is Mitch Lawrence with a Sports Minute for Workers Independent News. The National Football League is dealing these days with an alarming life and death issue, namely concussions. A lot of people think that the NFL has turned its back on many of its former players who have ended up after their careers with severe brain injuries, some of whom even took their own lives because they spent too much time using their heads as projectiles. There have been lawsuits against the NFL by scores of former players, and on Christmas Day, there will be the release of a new movie called Concussion, about how the league tried to cover up the extent of brain trauma injury. Clearly, this is no laughing matter, even if Roger Staubach tried to turn it into one the other night. During a black-tie dinner in New York, the former star of the Dallas Cowboys made a joke mocking his own history of concussion. By his own count, Staubach suffered at least 10 concussions back in the 60s and 70s as he was quarterbacking Dallas's 2 Super Bowl wins. Now he's the one making jokes, rather than being a spokesman for the players to address this serious issue. Staubach still has a lot of clout in football circles. He was called Captain America during his playing days because he was clean-cut and had played college football at the Navy Academy. Now he's doing a disservice to everyone and anyone who has ever paid a high price for playing pro football. It's no laughing matter, and Roger Staubach is the last one who needs to be reminded of that.
Brought to you by the IBEW, 750,000 men and women powering the way for an American comeback. Information on how to become an International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers Power Professional is online at ibew.org.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. The United Steelworkers International Executive Board is urging rejection of the TPP trade deal. A formal resolution against the TPP said that the USW sought a trade agreement for the U.S. and Canada that would lift wages up rather than pushing them down, one that would reduce our nation's accumulated trade deficits that continue to mount, one that would promote domestic manufacturing and employment rather than more outsourcing and offshoring, one that would begin to reverse the widening gap of income inequality. Steelworkers President Leo Gerard, UAW President Dennis Williams, and Teamsters President Jim Hoffa co-wrote an opinion piece that concluded, quote, despite the efforts of supporters to frame this 12-nation Pacific Rim agreement as the gold standard and one that would stick up for the interest of millions of workers in the U.S. and abroad, the TPP fails on all counts. Senator Bernie Sanders is being virtually blacked out on corporate network news despite poll numbers showing he would fare better than Hillary Clinton against the GOP field of presidential contenders. This is despite Sanders drawing the biggest crowds and having poll numbers that equal Donald Trump's. The Tyndall Report, which tracks CBS, NBC, and ABC network news coverage, says that so far this year, ABC has devoted 81 minutes to Trump and a mere 20 seconds to Sanders. NBC gave Sanders 2.9 minutes, CBS 6.4 minutes through the end of November.
This is Mitch Lawrence with a Sports Minute for Workers Independent News. The National Football League is dealing these days with an alarming life and death issue, namely concussions. A lot of people think that the NFL has turned its back on many of its former players who have ended up after their careers with severe brain injuries, some of whom even took their own lives because they spent too much time using their heads as projectiles. There have been lawsuits against the NFL by scores of former players, and on Christmas Day, there will be the release of a new movie called Concussion, about how the league tried to cover up the extent of brain trauma injuries. Clearly, this is no laughing matter, even if Roger Staubach tried to turn it into one the other night. During a black tie dinner in New York, the former star of the Dallas Cowboys made a joke mocking his own history of concussion. By his own count, Staubach suffered at least 10 concussions back in the 60s and 70s as he was quarterbacking Dallas' 2 Super Bowl wins. Now he's the one making jokes, rather than being a spokesman for the players to address this serious issue. Staubach still has a lot of clout in football circles. He was called Captain America during his playing days because he was clean-cut and had played college football at the Navy Academy. Now he's doing a disservice to everyone and anyone who has ever paid a high price for playing pro football. It's no laughing matter, and Roger Staubach is the last one who needs to be reminded of that.
Brought to you by the IBEW, 750,000 men and women powering the way for an American comeback. Information on how to become an International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers Power Professional is online at ibew.org.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Yes, it is all about the children, even after they're born. Rick Smith.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. Lots of talk on the federal level about the new education bill. Lots of talk about testing. In fact, a lot of my friends are saying, oh, no, Rick, you're wrong. President Obama is pulling back from all of the testing. And as we've talked about on the program, it seems to me not so much pulling back on the high stakes test as moving forward with a lot of much lower stake testing like every day. But the question then becomes, with these high stake tests, are they good for our kids? Is it good for education? Is it doing what we want it to do? And the answers that I'm getting from folks, not so much. So what happens if you have a conscience that says, you know what, I'm not going to put kids in a situation where they come to school and they're crying, they're just beaten down by these tests. My next guest is one of those folks who tried to step forward and say, you know what, I'd like to kind of get out of that. That's why I've asked Kathleen Jeske. She is a 6th grade teacher out in Portland, Oregon. She also does a blog that I suggest people take a look at, teachertalkstruth.com. We got a link at thericksmithshow.com. Kathleen, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you, Rick.
So walk me through this whole, as a teacher, what's the experience like being the one who has to administer these tests for people who don't know, the classrooms are basically covered over with paper, the doors are sealed. It's almost like a prison, isn't it?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm in Canby, which is outside of Portland. I always say Portland because nobody knows where Canby is. We're sort of a semi-rural bedroom/farming community. And when the tests come, we have to have the children. This year we were given the test in our classroom. They had to put we call them offices, but they're cardboard carrels, so they are completely isolated. Can't ask a question. We have to cover things up all over our room that have been there, so they can't use any outside references. You can't enter the room unless you're some sort of authorized person who's been cleared to administer the test. So it's very restrictive.
Yeah, I mean it's almost crazy. And I've told the story probably a million times on the program of my oldest daughter when we began opting our kids out a couple of years back, who was doing the play teaching thing with her 2 younger siblings. And, not in an angry way, but scolding way, saying, you know what, if we don't pass these tests, you pay attention. If you don't pass them, they're going to take money, and they're going to take money from the school, and the school's going to close down because we're not going to have any money and no schools and basically nowhere to go. And I'm going, wow, for a 5th grader to have that kind of a mentality is kind of scary. And I think the wrong direction, in my view, for education.
Yes, I agree. It's really sad how very focused on a single test, or I guess 2 tests at the end of the year, we've become.
So walk me through this, because I know how difficult it is here in Pennsylvania for me as a parent to opt my kids out. I had to go through a whole, send a letter, set up an appointment, go examine the test, go sign a blood oath that I have a religious problem with these tests, since that's all they give us here in Pennsylvania. As a teacher, the culture seems all about these tests. Walk me through how you tried to maybe not be part of that.
So it started, first of all, I was feeling horrible in my conscience about, year after year, it's gotten worse. More and more tests, more and more focus on the test. Less and less flexibility for students that are special education or English language learners, which is mostly who I work with. I teach in a bilingual dual immersion program, and over half my students are native Spanish speakers. And of course, the tests are in English, the English language arts test. So when the Smarter Balance started coming down and I started looking at it, I just thought, this is so horrible. And I heard from people in Washington that had, and in my own school that had piloted the test, how very long it was going to be, and just so not ready for prime time. It was basically a beta run, it felt like, of the test. So what I did is I connected with some Washington BATs. I'm the leader of Oregon BAT teachers also, as well as a member of Oregon Save Our Schools. And 4 of my friends in Washington State, up near Seattle, had made a statement at their school board saying that their conscience was bothering them. They would like to be released from their duty of administering the test because of that. And so I basically copied the portion of their statement that said that as a teacher, my conscience doesn't allow me to feel good about administering this test. And I am also the secretary of my local education association. So I brought this to our local, and we all made a plan to go to our school board and just make a big statement that we were not in favor of these tests. Our local president had also opted his own children out of the test, and they attend school in our district. And he made that statement. And then I stood up and just read a brief statement that I felt that these tests really reminded me of the literacy tests that were given in the South. prior to the Civil Rights Act. They're excluding a lot of children from things like electives if they don't pass the test, which I feel is a civil rights violation for my English language learners for sure.
Certainly.
And then I said I would like to be excused from administering the test. And
that could not have gone over
the
well.
School board was great.
But that couldn't have gone over well with the administration. I mean, at some point, if everybody opts out, who's going to give it?
Right. And initially the reaction was great. And our school board, in fact, ended up being, because of the solidarity of our teaching staff around this issue, ended up being one of two school boards that made a resolution in the state, two that I know of. Portland was the other one, that they felt that the testing had gotten a bit out of control. I didn't feel the statement was strong enough. And then after the school board meeting, I kind of didn't hear anything. And so I thought, well, I wonder if they're just going to go, oh, good job, and think I'm kidding about this. So I sent another letter to the school board and our superintendent, and I said, so what's the word on me being excused from administration? At which point I got back an email that said, well, if you refuse to administer, you could be charged with insubordination and subject to discipline up to and including termination.
Wow.
So I then published that whole thing on my blog. It was actually why I started writing a blog, because I wanted people to know that teachers are against this, because I think a lot of people were being told at that time, oh, teachers love these tests. They think they're great, these new tests. And that's not the case at all.
It's not the case. And, I've talked to my kids' teachers over the years, and they've all kind of given you that body language, like, I really can't talk about this. And, oh my gosh, you're talking about this. And it's you listen to this kind of fear that goes on. And I'm surprised, to be honest, that they wrote it down and sent you an email saying, we'll terminate you. That's usually one of those things they close the door and bring you in and go, oh, you were serious about that? Well, since you were serious, if you do it, we're going to fire you. That's something I would have thought would have been done face to face. Absolutely shocked they wrote it down.
Well, I've been in this community, and like I said, it's a small community. I've been teaching here for 15 years. I have friends on the school board. I feel like our superintendent is a pretty straight up guy, and I have a lot of connections with parents, so that may be why. And plus, I'm going to again say the solidarity of our local association in really coming out and showing up at that school board meeting, and the parents, because right after that school board meeting and at the school board meeting, our president announced that we were going to be doing a showing of standardized, and a number of school board members and parents, a lot of parents showed up. And we ended up being one of the communities in Portland that got our wrists slapped by the Oregon Department of Education for having a large number of opt-outs. And they were doing the same threatening tactics about, your schools are going to lose money from the federal government if you have too many opt-outs. But so far, no, that's not happened to anyone. So.
Yeah, I mean, I look at this and, that's the fear, I think, of the testing cabal, if you will, that finally we wake up as parents and as teachers and as educators and go, this just isn't good for kids. So if you could, take me through a couple of the stories of how you came to this. Why I've told my story, how we got to it with our children. And I've heard that story replicated time and time again, stories of kids bawling their eyes out because the stress is killing them. Or, you've got the kids like you've said, English as a second language, they've got enough struggles already other than be labeled as a failure on a test that they're not going to get for months down the road. I'm curious your journey into this.
Yeah, that it really was a lot about those kids. Well, first of all, I have never, my own children, my oldest daughter, I sort of opted her out of the state test in around 2000 when it was kind of first getting started. It must have been 2001 or something. She failed a math test and at that point there were no high stakes, and she was going to have to get pulled out of her advanced math class to go and retake this math test. And she was sort of complaining about it. I said, well, just don't go. Nothing's going to happen. And she didn't go and nothing happened. But then progressively the stakes got higher. And I watched students that, and I've been teaching for almost 20 years. And I just kept thinking of last year, what happened is I had a student in the past that was a second language learner of English. he was also had a learning disability, and he really struggled in school as a sixth grader. But later I saw that this student as a graduate, and he was able to graduate high school, and he was working successfully at a job that was something that he liked to do that was appropriate for him. I mean, he wanted to drive a truck, and he was driving a truck at the nursery, and he liked it, and he was very happy, and he never felt bad about himself. And the year that we started giving these tests, I had a student that really reminded me of him a lot. Same thing, English language learner with a disability, super fantastic kid. I mean, such a community service kid. We have a program called Outdoor School in Oregon, and he received more awards for community service, just helping without being asked, than anyone I've ever seen at Outdoor School. And I started thinking about him, and with all these new high stakes and what was going to happen, and is he going to graduate? Is he going to graduate with what we now have, a modified diploma? And is he going to feel good about himself by the end of school? And it made me really sad and upset. And so I think that was the point with that particular student, that I was like, I'm done with this. I have got to say something. I cannot let this go on.
Because as a teacher, you're not against testing, right?
No. And unfortunately, I am frequently, along with my colleagues, characterized that way, because no, and particularly as a teacher of English learners, we give multiple assessments of students to find out what their language level is, what their reading level is in two languages. So I'm absolutely not against testing. But this testing is very inappropriate. And speaking of children crying, I did see that the first year we gave Smarter Balance. My kids didn't cry, my sixth graders, because, they're too cool to cry. But I'm sure they were just guessing, because some of the kids that I know struggle most were done first. But a third grader, who is also, like I said, my school is a dual immersion school, I saw a third grader in the office just like sobbing and trying to catch her breath. And I thought she was in trouble or something. I didn't know. And her teacher walked by and I said, "What's going on?" And she said, "The test." That was what she was crying about. She felt so frustrated and upset that she had to leave the room and was almost hysterical in tears. It's really, really upsetting to me.
No, I've heard those stories multiple times over the years and in talking with educators, and that's not what school should be about, in my view. And look, I'm not anti-testing either. I've had this conversation with folks. Well, you don't want your kids to take the test because whatever. And I go, no, I'm all in favor of, as I was tested as a kid, every Friday, the nun would take the paper down to the mimeograph machine, tells you how old I am. And we'd have a test. And on Monday, guess what? The results were there, and we learned from what we didn't know, and we moved forward by what we did. These tests you take March, April, don't get them till November. I don't see the diagnostic part in this. So then you go, well, what is it about? First, it's about the money. I mean, we spend millions of dollars of money that should be better used in classrooms on these tests because they're proprietary. And if anyone's ever opted out here in Pennsylvania, it's almost a blood oath that you're never going to talk about tests. Can't talk about tests, don't know about tests, but you have to look at it before you can opt out of it. It's kind of nuts to me. And the other part of it is it's about beating down teachers and deprofessionalizing the industry, in my view.
Yes, I'm very concerned about that. A lot of my colleagues, I'm close to retirement, but not quite there. And as soon as this started coming down, a lot of my colleagues that were able to retire that I really believe would have continued working just said, "I'm done. I can't do this. I don't, that." And I work in a Title I school where, there's a lot of poverty. There's a lot of second language learners, and a lot of kids struggle. And the teachers that I worked with felt like they've been working all these years with these kids, and now they're getting blamed for problems that occur in our society that outside of school that they really have no control over. For example, I had a student a few years back whose mother was diagnosed with cancer. At the time, she had no insurance, and so she was trying to piece together care. Her cancer first was in remission, then it got worse, and his mother died during the school year, right around this time of year, as a matter of fact. And that student, he was a gifted student, but also, lived in poverty, second language learner. He really could do nothing for the rest of the year. I'm quite sure he didn't do well on the test. But for him, the important thing at that time was to hold it together, to not lose it during class, and to feel normal. And so, I mean, as a teacher, when you know the students, those are the things you want to focus on. And of course, we want kids to grow academically, certainly. But, sometimes other things take precedence. And in my school, one of the things that take precedence for everyone is we want everyone to be bilingual and biliterate when they leave. And no one ever cares if our kids speak a second language, even though they all leave very fluent bilinguals.
It makes you think, doesn't it? So let me ask you last line of questioning then. What advice do you give teachers who may be listening who go, you know what, I don't like the test either, and I have this problem, like you, with the problem of conscience. What advice do you give? What lessons did you learn? What words would you say?
What I would say is that teachers really need to speak up, even if it's only in a small way. If you don't feel you can go to your school board, tell a parent that you're friends with. Let the parents spread it. The parents in Oregon have taken this opt-out movement and run with it. We now have a bill that, like you said, it used to be, only religion, and people were having to write letters. And now we have gotten a bill that says very clearly, parents do have the right to opt out, although I believe they always did. Because once we spoke out and the parents heard it, the parents knew there's something wrong. And I think they kind of felt it already, a lot of them, but once they heard the teachers speak, they knew. Because parents know we care about their kids and they trust it.
Absolutely. Which is why I think what you do is great work. Again, the blog teacherstalktruth.com. We've got a link at the ricksmithshow.com. Just click on Kathleen Jeffsky's name, take you right there. Kathleen, I appreciate you taking a little time for us. Thanks for your insight. Thanks for your experience.
Thank you so much, Rick, for everything you're doing. I really appreciate it.
Really great talking with you. Again, the website there, Kathleen Jeffsky's website, teacherstalktruth.com. We've got a link at the Rick Smith Show. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people on the talk.
Stop playing games and fund those schools right. Tennessee, Mama Bears, sound the alarm about the TN ready tests that are ready to cause harm. Let's be clear about evaluations based on tests. We say stop that madness, it causes pain and stress. Are politicians really being sincere or just looking for a way to reduce opt-outs next year? I stepped to Indiana to draw attention to what's going on. Politicians out of touch, different sing a same old song. Don't take it personal, Governor Pence. Take offense. Education policies like common sense. I talk about NAEP scores. Do I need to say more? I guess that bad policy didn't help, and neither did the Common Core. Stop blaming the teachers and labeling schools. These self-proclaimed experts.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1990. That was the day that 20,000 workers in the city of Fez, in the North African country of Morocco, went out on strike. Austerity measures had hit the country's working people hard during the 1980s. A drought had made the situation even worse. Unemployment rates for those under 21 had soared to higher than 30%. Two labor unions, the General Workers' Trade Union and the Democratic Confederation of Labor, called for a general strike. Government officials agreed to meet with the unions to discuss their demands. But the government would not agree to specific wage increases. Plans for the general strike moved forward. It is estimated that more than half of the Fez workforce participated in the general strike. Large numbers of workers in other Moroccan cities also participated in the action. In Fez, bus drivers showed their solidarity by joining the strike. In response, the government attempted to keep bus service going by putting police and soldiers behind the wheel. This angered many of the young demonstrators, and some threw stones at the scab drivers. Armed forces clashed violently with the strikers. The government claimed the strikers started the violence. The protesters pointed toward the police. A fire was started at the 5-star Hotel Merendez in Fez. Other symbols of wealth, such as limousines, car dealerships, and banks, were also damaged. After the 24-day strike, Moroccan officials claimed that 2 demonstrators had been killed. But human rights groups disputed that number and said 33 had been killed. Many more were injured. Hundreds were arrested. After the strike, the government agreed to raise wages by 15%. Many protesters were tried for their participation in the demonstrations. Some received prison sentences as long as 10 years. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
This is the Media Matters Minute. I'm Eric Wustewald. In early December, Secretary of Defense Ash Carter announced that women would now be allowed to serve in all military combat roles. But when co-host Sandra Smith brought it up on Fox News' Outnumbered, Andrea Tinteros dismissed the idea. Here are Smith and Tinteros.
To Catherine's point, Andrea, she's saying as long as there is a physical endurance test and that woman passes it, she should be fair game for a combat unit.
No, I don't think so. Their mind needs to be on killing the enemy alone. And from the SEALs that I have talked to, when there's a woman in the unit, It is not. 14 Americans are gunned down, and they roll him out to make some very PC announcement about women.
But as Defense Secretary Carter noted about women in combat during his announcement, women will be allowed to serve in all military combat roles because, quote, we cannot afford to cut ourselves off from half of the country's talent and skills. For more on this and other stories, please visit MediaMatters.org.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous. The salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
We make Pennsylvania happen!
Than they've had.
Well, it's the biggest wave in school closings ever. Thousands of public schools are shutting down.
Lots of ugly cuts going on here.
Is calling for the closing of half the schools.
Fewer teachers and fewer schools.
They got these fools closing schools and it can't be ignored. As if our future is a budget line we cannot afford. They got no money for schools, but they got funding for war. They say the conversations goes, I say we break down the door. I say we stand up for our children, join together and fight. Because you can see.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So today on Bat Radio Monday, we've been talking about the high stakes testing. And as you know, we opted our kids out a number of years ago, just not seeing the value of all of the stress, all of the focus on these tests. And I can't tell you how many times we've gone to parent-teacher conferences and heard, don't worry, Mr. Smith, don't worry, Mrs. Smith, everything's great. Your kids will do well on the test. And I'm going, I'm not so thrilled with that evaluation because they're not taking the test. And that really kind of changes the conversation back to, okay, well, how can we get your kids to do this, this, and this? Back to the way I think education should be. And for me, these tests are one of those, one of those hurdles that I think as a society have to get over, take back, and maybe use that money in a much better way by smaller class sizes, better stuff, just kind of a thought. But we've been talking with teachers who, have a problem with the test and have stepped forward and said so. And which is why I've asked Beth Domino. She's an 8th grade science teacher out in Long Island, New York. She was one of those folks, stepped forward, said, I got a problem with this. I don't want to do it, not going to do it. And actually the administration didn't threaten or intimidate her, which I find very interesting. And that's why I've asked Beth on the program. Beth, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you so much for speaking with me today.
So walk me through this. You say that you don't want to give the test. What's the administration's response?
The administration's response, Dr. Rella said to me that he understands my conviction. He understands that the tests are not productive, that they don't do what tests should do, which is to either inform a teacher's pedagogy or to evaluate what a student knows. And therefore, he completely understands why I'm making this stand, and he decided to reassign me for the day.
And good on first of all, good on you and him as well for not going the we're going to threaten and intimidate and all that route. What are the rest of the teachers around you? What did they say? What's the response you got from them?
Well, the teachers in my local were certainly very proud of the stand that I took as the president. I represent them, and the other people that I've been around, other teachers, other parents. I speak in many different venues here on Long Island, speaking to parents and educators about refusing the test. They certainly agreed with me. And at the April 2015
NICE at New York State United Teachers Representative Assembly, I put forth the I Refuse resolution, and at that time, it was unanimously passed on the floor of the convention that every teacher should at least refuse to allow their child to take the test. Hopefully, the movement of conscientious objectors to refusing to administer the test will grow this year.
And it's grown every year. We've been opting our kids out. This will be the 4th year where we've done this, simply because, and I told the story a little bit earlier, you know, my oldest daughter was in 5th grade at the time, and played teaching with her younger siblings, and really scolding them, saying, you know, if we pay attention, because if we don't get this right and we don't pass this test, they're going to take money from the school, they're going to close the schools down, we'll have nowhere to go. And you go, what? I don't want my 5th grader hearing this, let alone my preschoolers.
Absolutely.
So walk me through how you got to this conversion. I mean, I've explained how I got to my position. What brought you to this? What did you see as a teacher on a daily basis that made you go, you know what, this just isn't right?
Well, in 8th grade science, we do participate in the assessment game. There is an 8th grade science test as well as the 4th grade science test, along with the annual ELA and math test. So I'm directly connected to the testing. I would say 6 years ago, I started to notice that the tests were becoming more and more important as far as evaluating what teachers were doing in the classroom. And I thought, this is dangerous, because teachers are now really invested in making kids do well on a test, so that the teacher, in fact, will be able to be evaluated based on that. And that's not what tests are intended to do.
Well, let me ask you this. Let me ask you this, Beth, because, you know, there's going to be someone out there going, well, wait a minute. The teacher's job is to make sure the kids do well on tests. These are just a reflection of how well they do and how well you're doing for them. Because, you know, every time I bring this up to people, they say, well, you're just against testing. And I'm not against testing at all. As long as it's diagnostic, as long as there's some immediate feedback, I'm all in favor of that. Walk me through the difference, though, if there is a difference in your mind.
Well, I'm not opposed to testing. I'm just opposed to testing as the end all and be all. As a science teacher, I do labs in my room. Students do lab write-ups. They also take quizzes on the labs. Students do group work. Students do homework. Students take ABC tests, multiple choice tests. All of these assessments are fine, along with projects, along with classwork, so that as the administrator of everything that's happening in that room, as the teacher, I can decide what a child knows and what a child doesn't know. And if a lot of things are happening that children aren't getting the point, I can change my pedagogy. I can change the way that I'm presenting material. That's why you give a test, to see who knows what, so that you know for them personally, for that student personally, and you also do it so that you can see if you're delivering the message well. The difference is that these tests are not doing that.
Right.
These tests are not specific to that purpose. And for that reason, and as well as giving them the title of high stakes, tests should never have the adjective high stakes in front of them ever. That adjective should never come into play. A test is not high stakes. It's just a test. And it's also only 1 day's performance. I judge a student based on 180 days. I don't base it based on 1 day.
Right.
That isn't fair.
And it isn't fair. And the other part of this is, you know, the tests that we're seeing now. And March, April is going to be testing season here in Pennsylvania with the PSSAs. And you don't get the results back until, what, October, November, the next year. So to me, there's no diagnostic part of this. There are other things at play. I say the money's one of it. The other part of it is deprofessionalizing the profession of teaching. As you've pointed out, you want to take tests early, often, to assess, to know where you need to work on. This isn't about that. These tests are solely about creating data, creating numbers, so that we can deprofessionalize and destroy the art of teaching, in my view.
And more importantly than destroying the art of teaching, I think, it's not allowing children to have the full scope of an experience in school that they will need later on in their lifetime.
Yep.
Just teaching to a test is not going to prepare a child to think. And in my opinion, what we do in school is we use subject matter to teach children to be viable world citizens, to give them the assurance that, number one, they can learn, to teach them how to learn, and to use those abilities and techniques to move them through their life. Life is not a multiple choice test.
It's a good point. But let me ask you this, Beth, because how much of this do you think, and this is kind of off the path, but how much of this is, destroying individualism and creating really just a class of folks who are right in the middle, and they're all marching along the same path, so that we don't have critical thinking citizens. We don't have people who are critical of capable of critical thought, so that maybe all of the crazy stuff that is going on and will continue in the future will continue to go on.
I think that it's very telling when there is a segment of the population who have a tremendous amount of money, they don't allow their children to be taught in this manner.
Yep.
I would say that at the risk of sounding paranoid, this may very well be a way to control the masses. You lock in what you want taught and how you want it taught specifically to a particular group within your population, and you allow only those who you want to get the other types of education to get those education. I don't know, that seems like I really should be paranoid.
But, at the end of it, I've been saying for years, education is that hill the working class of this country died to get and should be dying to maintain, because, you go look back just 100 years, which isn't all that long ago. All children didn't go to school. A lot of them went to work in the mines and in the mills and in factories. Those days could come back again. In fact, in 2012, we had a couple of presidential candidates. One in particular said, well, we should put those kids back to work, cleaning the bathrooms and get rid of those unionized janitors.
The problem is that children can be used in such a way that they push forth the agenda of adults, because they have no defenses, and what those adults are doing is indefensible. The truth of the matter is that corporate America figured out that there's money to be made in public education. If they privatize it, they can fill their coffers, and they are doing that on the backs of children. These tests are inappropriate as far as grade level is concerned. Rather than, if you're a fourth grader taking a fourth grade test, you're taking test questions that are for seventh and eighth graders. They're doing it in such a way where young children, 7, 8, 9-year-old children, are being required to sit for hours and take these types of tests. They are developmentally inappropriate. The way that the material is being required to be taught is developmentally inappropriate, and so the children cannot be successful. If a child cannot be successful year after year after year, then the child starts to believe the label that you give it. And so you do, in fact, create an adult that has no faith in themselves or their ability to learn. And so they stop learning.
And that's troublesome. And one of the things that you hit on there that just popped into my head is, one of our teachers this year explained that, I don't know which test it is, but they give the test at the beginning of the year. They give it 4 times a year, the exact same test. And it's all about, grading the teacher, not the kids. And they're expected to fail the first 2 or 3 times because they've never been exposed. When you said, fourth graders are taking 7th grade tests, same thing here. They're taking tests of information that's not in their world of understanding. They've never been exposed to it, and they're failing it, and they're supposed to. And it's kind of nuts to me.
The reason that I refuse to administer the SLOs this year is because that's exactly what the SLOs do, the Student Learning Objective Exams. What they do is they are part of my evaluation. And so how do I show growth in 75% of my students? Well, what I do is I give the students last year's final the first week in September. Now, they've never taken the course before, so of course they're all going to fail it. Then I do the same test later on in the school year after I've actually taught them the work. Of course, those students are going to do better because now they've actually been taught the work. So it doesn't, it's ridiculous. The way that the testing is being done is ridiculous. Tying the students' testing to me is ridiculous. If you want to test me, test me.
Right. And
Test
the other,
me.
absolutely. And the other part of this, and going back to what you said about, the wealth class and what their kids get, I've always said, give me what Rahm Emanuel's kids get, give me what President Obama's kids get, give me what Arnie Duncan's kids get, give my kids that same opportunity of smaller class sizes, no high stakes testing, lots of experiential learning, lots of investigative and lots of doing kind of things, and not this grill and drill. Give all kids that. If you really truly believe them.
What I would say in response to that is that the President of the United States was born a biracial child in Hawaii. His African father left home, and his white mother and her family raised him. He went to public schools. This young biracial boy grew up and became the President of the United States. What we're doing is we're saying that all children shouldn't be entitled to that. The president's children, I appreciate those children need to be protected, and that's why they're in the school that they're in, but that shouldn't be true of every single child that's only of the wealthiest class in this country. In this country, public education is the leveler. It is what makes the playing field available to every single child to grow up and become the President of the United States if they so choose, regardless of race, regardless of gender, regardless of sexual orientation or religion. Everybody, if they're an American citizen, should get a world-class public education, and they should be able to become the president if that's what they choose to do.
I mean, as a nation, we need that. We can't in the Teddy Kennedy bill, George W. Bush bill, No Child Left Behind. I believe in that concept, even though that fell way short of the ideal. To me, that's what's good for the country. So, last line of questioning I've got for you. You were one of the brave souls who stepped forward, took a stand. What do you say to other teachers who, because I got to tell you, I talk to all of my kids' teachers, and you can see that they're not thrilled with what's going on, but they don't want to buck the administration. They don't want to have the target on their back. What do you say to those folks? And maybe how do we move forward in stopping this testing regime?
Well, I'm the president of my local. And because I'm the president, I'm supposed to be out there taking the chances, taking the stand, so that my members, I'm holding them safe while I push the system. Most teachers are afraid for their own jobs, as am I. Anything could have happened to me. I will be found ineffective this year because I'm not administering the slows. The truth of the matter is that most teachers are afraid for their jobs. And that has to be appreciated.
Right.
So the least teachers can do is they can refuse to allow their own children to take the test. They may not be courageous enough to take the stand that I took, and there are many other teachers in the state of New York, that teachers of conscience. That we are a group, so there are many more people that have done what I've done. I'm not the only one that's done this, but I appreciate that teachers might not feel comfortable doing that. What they can do is help grow the opt-out movement. What they can do is refuse to allow their children to take these tests. What they can do is they can go to their school board meetings, they can go to their PTA meetings and tell all the other parents that they are refusing to allow their children to take the test, and that they should as well. So teachers can make a stand without actually being insubordinate. Right. What I've done is taken a chance on being insubordinate. And I don't know that everybody wants to do that. But you can make requirements for your own family, for your own children, and in your own school district, maybe not where you work, but where you live, in your home school district, you can go in and say, this is wrong. I'm going to vote for school board members who believe what I believe and are here to defend children, teachers, and public education.
Well, good for you, and thank you for the work that you do. Good on you. And look, this is something that all of us hopefully are going to have to move forward on. And I wish you the best of luck, and I appreciate you spending a little time with us.
I thank you so much for having this radio show.
Thanks so much, Beth. I really appreciate it. Again, if you want to take a look at some of their writing, of the Port Jefferson Station Teachers Association, we've got a link to the pjsta.org website. Just click on Beth's name, take you right there. Let's take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
I want to take a moment to thank you for your support. If you're helping to raise children as a parent, teacher, family member, etc., I acknowledge the sacrifices that you make, and I thank you. Now, in terms of this music, I hope it comes across very clearly how much I love teaching and how much I believe we must do better for our children. As a veteran teacher, I've seen the damage caused by ill-conceived reforms and the era of teacher bashing, labeling students, and labeling schools. We need as much support as possible to fight this machine that's not making decisions with the best interest of children in mind. Please, stand with us.
We're yelling, stop this madness from the front lines, bringing you a breath of fresh air. Check the sunrise, how people grind, and you know that we don't stop. Highly effective, never rise right to the top.
Don Blankenship did not get what he deserves in his federal trial, but he definitely deserves what he got. Guilty declared all 12 West Virginia jurors who pondered the charge that this arrogant and avaricious CEO of Massey Energy, Inc. willfully conspired to violate America's mine safety laws. As a result of that conspiracy, 29 miners were essentially murdered by the corporation on April 5, 2010, in a horrific explosion deep inside Massey's Upper Big Branch coal mine. Blankenship, a multimillionaire right-wing ideologue, union buster, and political heavyweight, ran the UBB mine like a lawless third-world operator. It was one of the most dangerous workplaces in the country because this kingpin of king coal relentlessly put profit over people, recklessly endangering miners. But coal is, indeed, king in West Virginia, so the laws are written to coddle the royals of the industry. Thus, Blankenship's guilt is to be punished by a maximum of 1 year in prison, and his diamond-studded legal team intends to have the jury's unanimous verdict of guilt tossed down the dark shaft of judicial favoritism for the rich. What the mining baron deserved was to be put in stocks on the state's capitol grounds, where he would be subjected to a steady stream of derision from the families of mine workers who were degraded, made ill, and even killed to haul up coal so Don could live in luxury. He escaped that justice, but he'll never shake off the guilty judgment of the jurors or of the American people who followed the month-long, widely covered trial that fully documented the rank immorality of this man and his ill-gotten fortune. This is Jim Hightower saying he undoubtedly thinks he got away with murder, but in the court of public opinion, his legacy is that he has turned the name Blankenship into a four-letter word.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
Here for a 2-minute roundup of the headlines driving this week and what will still matter next week, I'm Luke Vargas for Talk Media News at the United Nations. Mauricio Macri was elected president of Argentina this week as the center-right candidate unseated the left-wing incumbent Cristina Fernández de Kirchner. Macri says he plans to stabilize the country's floundering economy by scaling back state-run enterprises and loosening up currency controls. The French Parliament continues to debate reforms to the country's terrorism and state of emergency laws in the wake of the Paris attacks. It was reported earlier this week that legislators were debating banning free public Wi-Fi in the country and prohibiting use of the anonymous web browsing software Tor. But Prime Minister Manuel Valls now says neither proposal will be signed into law, telling reporters that, quote, the internet is a freedom. And Jordan and the UN can't see eye to eye. On Tuesday, the world body accused the kingdom of denying entry to 12,000 refugees stranded in the Syrian desert, many of them women and children. But Jordan pushed back, saying the UN numbers were exaggerated and that its borders were in fact open. Talk Media News asked Jordan's UN ambassador, Dina Kawar, if the border was really closed.
We never closed our borders. Never closed our borders.
So should that group go elsewhere to have something happen?
I think the UN should be helping us more and more and providing support for the time being.
UN spokesman Farhan Haq stressed that such support had already been offered.
The UN Refugee Agency says that there is space in Ashraf camp to accommodate a further group of refugees. So if there's a willingness on all sides to allow for that movement, we would be able to put them up there.
For more global news headlines, visit talkmedianews.com.
Workers in the late 1930s began exerting their recently guaranteed right to organize and join unions. Millions of workers flocked to join the labor organization of their choosing to collectively bargain for better wages, hours, and working conditions. Factory, mill, and mine owners, not eager to embrace the changes, fought vehemently to deny workers their rights. As company tactics grew more heavy-handed and brutal, the workers' organizing methods changed. Sit-down strikes became a way for workers to demand their rights and to force management to listen. With a wave of a handkerchief, the tip of a hat, workers would shut down their machines, lay down their hammer, and sit down. Workers at the Hershey Chocolate Factory in Hershey, Pennsylvania, seeking to reduce the 60-hour-long work week, decided to form a union. Initially, an agreement was reached, but as the economy took a downturn, the company willfully violated the agreement by laying off the most senior workers, those who just happened to be the most ardent union supporters. The workers voted to strike the very next day. At 11 a.m. on April 2nd, 1937, a red handkerchief was waved and the workers began the first sit-down strike in Pennsylvania's history. The company reacted by forming the Loyal Workers Club. These strikebreakers consisted of hired thugs from New York City and local farmers, dairy producers, and shopkeepers who were dependent on the factory. On April 6, Hershey organized a loyalty parade. After hours of rallying speeches, the lathered-up Loyal Workers Club mob found pipes and clubs that had been manufactured at the Hershey planing mill. The angry mob headed to the Hershey factory to throw their strikers out. Songs of solidarity sung by the striking workers could be heard from inside the factory as the angry mob burst into the plant. Blocking the only exit, the Loyal Workers Club, loyal only to management and greed, began pummeling the workers as they tried to escape. The assault left numerous workers bloody and beaten, many unconscious. Within days, Hershey reopened and recognized a renamed version of the Loyal Workers Club. In May of 1938, the National Labor Relations Board ruled Hershey had violated the law and the company union was dissolved. Soon the workers joined the Bakery and Confectionery Workers Local 464, who have faithfully represented the workers ever since. This Rick Smith Show Labor History Moment was made possible by a grant from the Labor Education Center at IUP. For more information, visit www.thericksmithshow.com.
We have struggled, we have prayed, we're still searching for something more. We have struggled, we still pray, we're looking for the chance to be free, to break free.
Back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind. You can email me, Rick at thericksmithshow.com. Big stuff coming up in the new year. Looking forward to 2016. The big presidential race going to heat up. Looking forward to hitting New Hampshire. Looking forward to all of the fun, the insanity, the craziness. It's going to be an interesting year, but also some big changes that we're doing here at the program. Going to be doing a couple of things differently. Some more daily features. Some things that people have said, you know what, I'd like more of this or that. And we'd love to hear your thoughts on what you'd like to see in the new year. You can email me, Rick at thericksmithshow.com. At the end of it, we're going to expand our ability to the on-demand stuff. Our podcast numbers went through the roof this year, had a fantastic year. And thank you to all the folks who participate and all the people who take a little bit of their day to spend with us. I really, really appreciate it. And I love the interaction. Over the next couple of weeks, we're taking a little vacation, going to spend a little time with family, do that whole kind of catching up. The year kind of this year just blasted by. It just seems like we were doing this last year. And all of a sudden, man, it's 2016 and we're thinking about, another year and another presidential election. And we're, just need a little time to cool the jets, reconnect with family and enjoy the holidays. And I'm a big big believer in that. And starting on Wednesday this week, we're going to redo the entire People's Tour of the southern states that we just completed back in August. I got a lot of response from people going, those were just some amazing interviews and some fantastic shows from the road. So we thought, might as well recreate the entire trip for the 13 days that we will be away. We're going to go and replay those and rebroadcast those programs because there were some just amazing stories in there. Some things that, and I've done a couple of other interviews and stuff where I go, I think back to that tour, and I think back to all those interviews and the people that we met. And I'll be honest, there were some people who just they will be with me now forever. The stories that they told, the things that they shared, the life experiences, and the history that they lived. Just really, I think of, there are probably 10 names that just click right off the top of my head of the stories that you just go, man. I think of Fate Morris, for instance. I don't know how you get up the day after you find your sister in the rubble of the 16th Street Baptist Church bombing. I don't know how you do that. And then, all of these years later to still be carrying that and still willing to talk about it in a way that is constructive, in a way that says, we still got work to do and we still need to be moving forward. And that one, more than any of them, that was the heartbreak of, because when you talked about the civil rights movement, and you talked about all of the battles and all of the fights and all of the organizing and everything that went on and the hatred. I mean, in talking with people, you could see, that
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email rick@thericksmithshow.com or interact with us anytime at thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Its color like tide flood beneath the lunar sway, imperial, mysterious, in amorous array. Democracy is coming to the USA.